The dark angel proclaimed that the Holy Queen, who sat upon the throne of heaven, should rejoice, for when the great disaster arrived, it would be the most catastrophic event since the creation of the world. From the beginning of time until that moment, nothing would compare. The Queen of Mercy and Love, Mary, should find joy in it. It would be a catastrophe unlike any other, especially for pregnant women and mothers. Prayers should be offered that the disaster would not begin in winter. Saint Seraphim would sing alongside her, for they would all witness it with their own eyes. The earth and the sky would resound with a hymn, and Regina would be the only salvation. Where there was a corpse, the vultures would gather, just as it had been foretold in Matthew 24. Serena, her face stricken with fear, observed the unfolding events with growing horror. The thought crossed her mind, was this a level of destruction meant for their enemies? The monstrous creatures before her looked powerful enough to wipe an entire nation off the map. It was an unimaginable sight, a calamity beyond control. Nori, standing beside her, had an expression of excitement rather than fear. There was a certainty in her stance, a readiness to fight. But Serena, ever the realist, understood the gravity of the situation. There was no time to think about fighting. People needed to be saved. She called out with urgency, ordering Nori to focus on rescuing civilians while she attempted to stall the monsters. Even if all she could do was buy a little time, that alone would be enough. Nori's face fell with emotion, her eyes glistening with tears, but Serena remained firm. There was no need to panic. Backup forces were already on their way. National intelligence had detected the portal's emergence, and reinforcements would arrive soon. The situation was dire, but she had to hold out until help came. At that moment, an office worker's voice crackled through the radio, announcing an emergency. The portal had been confirmed. It had opened on the campus of a Korean university. An urgent directive followed, calling upon all awakened individuals in the vicinity to respond immediately. Serena felt her pulse quicken. She was only a level 3 awakened. Holding out was her priority. Survival was secondary. Without warning, a level 4 demon appeared. Its speed almost beyond human perception. It lunged at her, uttering words in an unknown language, harsh, guttural sounds that sent chills down her spine. Nori's scream rang out, full of terror, but there was no time to hesitate. Serena forced herself to push aside the fear and shouted for Nori to escape. Then, a new presence emerged. The atmosphere shifted, thickened with an aura of overwhelming power. The Demon Lord appeared, stepping forward without a trace of fear. His voice carried absolute authority as he commanded everyone to stand aside. Without hesitation, he struck down the demon with a single devastating blow. The battle was over in an instant. Serena stood in stunned silence. Her mind struggled to process what she had just witnessed. The monster, so powerful, so menacing, had been obliterated with a single attack. It was an act of strength beyond anything she had ever known. A force she could not comprehend. The Demon Lord, calm yet imposing, turned his gaze upon her. There was something knowing in his expression, something familiar. The weight of his words lingered as he asked whether she was human. The familiarity in his tone sent a wave of confusion through her. He spoke as though they had met before, though Serena had no recollection of him. His next words were spoken with a gravity that sent a shiver down her spine. He wanted to know the year. There was an urgency in his voice, a need for confirmation. Her response came instinctively: October 6, 2024. The Demon Lord's expression darkened. Only a year had passed. He clenched his fists slightly, as if struggling to contain the storm within. Time had moved differently for him. In his mind, centuries had passed. The torment he had endured felt endless, and yet, in this world, only a single year had gone by. The distortion of time had been far worse than he had anticipated. A year ago, he had faced his greatest enemy. In that fateful battle, he had been cast into the Rage Demon Realm, a place of torment, chaos, and war. His survival had been uncertain, the trials he faced unimaginable. The passage of time had stretched unbearably. Every moment in that abyss had been a struggle for survival, an endless war against horrors beyond comprehension. And yet, against all odds, he had emerged victorious. Now, he had returned. Serena's thoughts raced as she tried to make sense of it all. Could he be an S-rank awakened? Or perhaps some secret weapon created by the state? It didn't seem possible. She was an intelligence officer. If there were a force this powerful under governmental control, she would know about it. And yet, here he was, standing before them, a figure of pure power. The Demon Lord observed his surroundings, his thoughts moving swiftly. There was no one else around, which meant they had entered a different point in time. The effects of the portal were more unpredictable than he had assumed. A military vehicle suddenly arrived, its brakes screeching as it came to a halt. Joan leaped out, his voice booming with orders. The squad of awakened fighters behind him moved into position immediately. There was no time for hesitation. Joan greeted Serena and Nori, noting their presence before quickly surveying the battlefield. His gaze darted around, searching for the enemy. Confusion crept into his expression as he took in the strange stillness. He was informed that the portal had spawned creatures of at least the second level, but the absence of visible threats left him questioning the situation. One of the awakened fighters suddenly shouted at the Demon Lord, ordering him to move aside. His tone was impatient, dismissive. He saw the Demon Lord as nothing more than a cosplayer playing at being a warrior. Serena's fear spiked as she tried to warn them. This was a mistake. The Demon Lord wasn't someone to be challenged so carelessly. Joan, sensing something was wrong, asked for an explanation, but before he could react further, the Demon Lord issued a calm yet chilling statement. He would grant them 3 seconds. 3 seconds to prove that they deserved to live. The tension snapped as one of the fighters grew excited, drawing his dagger. He believed that if he did not act first, he would be the one to fall. With a sharp movement, he launched forward, unleashing an attack named Blade Storm. The Demon Lord remained utterly unfazed. He extended a single finger and pressed it against the fighter's forehead. In the next instant, the man was sent flying, blood trailing in the air as he crashed violently. The 3 seconds had passed. Joan's voice wavered with disbelief, demanding to know what had just happened, but the Demon Lord remained composed. There was no time to dwell on unnecessary matters. The portal was about to reopen, and when it did, they would not be able to stop what came next. The earth trembled violently, a deep, ominous rumble echoing in the distance. Joan instinctively grabbed his head, fear seeping into his expression. Then, from within the portal, something emerged. A towering, nightmarish creature crawled out, its form radiating destruction. The radio crackled once more. Joan's voice, steady yet urgent, relayed the final message: the enemy was a level 6 entity. The code word was confirmed: Red Horn. This creature had the power to kill over 30 million people in a single day. The organization's workers erupted in urgent, panicked shouts through the radio, calling for an immediate evacuation within a 10-kilometer radius. All awakened forces were ordered to retreat from the residential area, and squads were being mobilized: Black Turtle Squad, White Tiger Squad. Everyone available had to respond. Joan, his voice sharp with urgency, commanded the immediate summoning of all awakened individuals across Korea. The largest monster in recorded history had appeared, and their only chance was to buy time for civilians to escape. Even if it cost them their lives, they had no choice. With desperation in his voice, Joan called out to Nori, ordering her to take Serena and run at once. Meanwhile, the awakened warriors near the battlefield launched into a coordinated assault against the colossal creature. Blades clashed against its hide, spells erupted across its massive form, and the battle intensified. Nori, her face pale with fear, turned to the Demon Lord, her voice trembling as she called out to him. She asked if he would fight alongside them, if he would help. The Demon Lord, unfazed by the unfolding chaos, turned slightly and questioned whether he should even bother. His tone was cold, distant, as though the destruction before him meant nothing. With desperation laced in her voice, Nori insisted that this was his world too, and he had a duty to protect it. He asked her for a reason, one single reason why he should intervene. Strength dictated life and death. The strong survived, the weak perished. There were no exceptions. This was the absolute law of power. If they wanted to live, they had to fight for it. If they failed, they would be consumed by those stronger than them. He suggested that instead of wasting time, she could tell him where Xian's office was. Mi, standing among the awakened, trembled as she witnessed one of the fighters strike the monster, only to be met with an explosion of blood. The brutal scene unfolded before her, and she silently fell to her knees, overwhelmed. The Demon Lord, unaffected, began to walk away. With a dispassionate gaze, he remarked that she was useless. Serena, her expression serious and filled with frustration, called after him. She refused to accept that they were all the same. What exactly was he searching for? Had he lost his mind? She turned to me, urging her to leave with them since the Demon Lord wouldn't be of any help. But Mi, her eyes filled with sorrow, shook her head. She did not agree. Strength wasn't just about power, it was about responsibility. Strong people weren't meant to abandon the defenseless. Summoning 2 enormous swords, Nori charged forward. She launched herself into the air, her resolve burning fiercely as she prepared to strike. Her voice rang out with conviction. True strength meant standing up for the weak. Positioning herself right above the demon, she activated her ability Split. But before her attack could land, the massive creature countered with terrifying speed. Its enormous claw lashed out, knocking the weapon from her hands. The impact sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The monster's mouth gaped wide open, ready to devour her. In that instant, the Demon Lord gave a single command. His voice carried absolute authority: fall. The colossal beast, seemingly defying all logic, collapsed onto the ground as if crushed by an unseen force. In the blink of an eye, the monster's dominance was shattered. The Demon Lord stepped forward, catching Nori effortlessly in his arms. He studied her for a moment before smirking. She was an interesting girl. He liked her. His name was Tai Young. From this moment forward, he declared himself her master. He was the demon lord. Nori's breath caught in her throat. Disbelief flashed across her face as she stammered out a question. Was he truly a demon? Before an answer could be given, the massive creature stirred. The monster, undeterred by its previous failure, began gathering power for a devastating attack. Its body trembled as immense energy surged within it, but the demon lord remained unimpressed. With a cold expression, he remarked on how pathetic the creature was. How dare it even attempt to bare its fangs at him? With one decisive strike, he silenced it. His voice thundered as he commanded the beast to submit. He stepped forward, unshaken, and stated that its arrogance was misplaced. It had dared to look down upon him, but now it would learn its place. With a simple motion of his hand, the monster was sent hurtling into the ground with earth-shattering force. The battlefield trembled as its massive form sank deep into the earth, buried under the weight of his overwhelming power. Now, they were finally on the same level. Extending his hand once more, the demon lord performed another gesture. From within the beast's body, something began to emerge. A brilliant glow pulsed within the remains of the fallen creature, and in an instant, a magic crystal was drawn from its core. Joan, who had watched everything unfold with a mixture of awe and terror, stared at the glowing object with wide eyes. He struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. Was this a magic stone? He had never before laid eyes on anything of this magnitude. The sheer size and radiance of the crystal were beyond anything recorded in history. The demon lord turned away from the stunned soldiers, his attention shifting back to Nuri. He instructed her to follow him. Fear flickered across her face. She hesitated, unsure if she had heard him correctly. But the demon lord made his stance clear. He would not repeat himself. She had no choice in the matter. Before she could respond, Joan quickly stepped between them. There was gratitude in his voice. He thanked the demon lord for defeating the monster, but he made it clear that Nori was one of them. She could not simply be taken away. Tun regarded him with indifference. He stated, with a calm certainty, that he could do whatever he pleased. After all, he had never asked for permission. In a single instant, Joan and another awakened fighter were struck by an unknown force. The attack was so swift and overwhelming that they barely registered what had happened. Joan's mind reeled as he tried to comprehend the situation, but before he could react, the demon lord stepped forward once more. It was time to get rid of these annoying bugs. Before any further destruction could unfold, Nori suddenly cried out. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded with him to stop. She would go with him. If he would just leave the others alone, she would follow. The demon lord considered her for a moment. There was something intriguing about her. She had a sense of justice, yet her power was rare. A double rank, an anomaly even among the most powerful beings. In the world of dragons, this was like stumbling upon a priceless gem buried among common stones. Her characteristics were flawed due to the influence of inferior races, but if nurtured properly, she could become something far greater. He extended his hand toward her. This was perfect. He had chosen her. Let her take his hand. Nori, overwhelmed yet unable to resist, reached out. As soon as their hands met, an immense force erupted around them. Magical energy surged, forming a swirling storm of power. The intensity of it was beyond anything the awakened forces had seen before. A towering pillar of energy burst into the sky, illuminating the battlefield with a brilliant, almost blinding light. Nori screamed as the energy consumed her, the force of the ritual taking hold. But Taehyung reassured her there was nothing to fear. This was merely the sealing ritual. There was nothing bad about it. The energy continued to rise, a vast and uncontrollable force marking the beginning of something far greater than any of them had imagined. The shock of the previous events still lingered as Serena sat across from the leader of the group. Her mind was racing, unable to fully process what had just happened. Suho, his voice filled with disbelief, expressed his astonishment. The idea that a single awakened individual had managed to kill 6 enemies with his bare hands and then disappear with one of their own was beyond comprehension. Even after witnessing it, it still seemed unreal. Serena admitted that she found it difficult to believe as well. The man had introduced himself as Taehyung, and he had been searching for Xian's office. Upon hearing this, Suho's demeanor shifted sharply. His voice rose in shock, demanding to know why she hadn't mentioned that sooner. Serena, amused by his reaction, teased him with a smirk. Did he actually think they could capture someone like that? It was simply impossible. No one could handle a monster of his level. Meanwhile, Taehyung walked calmly through the dimly lit streets alongside Nori. Their journey had been silent, but his thoughts were anything but still. Stopping in an alley, he turned to her, asking if they had arrived. Nori, still filled with excitement, confirmed that they were almost there. She checked her phone, hesitating as she considered her next move. A thought crossed her mind. Should she send a message? Should she alert someone about their location? Before she could act, Taehyung addressed her directly. She had no need to send their geolocation. It was pointless. The space around them was sealed, and he already knew what she was thinking. The woman she had been in contact with had already overheard what he was looking for. Someone would be sent to this location soon anyway. But to him, those people were nothing more than cockroaches. Their presence didn't matter. They were of no consequence. And as for her, she had no way to escape. She already belonged to him. With his command, he instructed her to lead the way. Nori, still brimming with energy, hurried ahead. Taehyung followed at a steady pace, but his mind drifted elsewhere. After spending what felt like an eternity wandering in hell, he still couldn't forget his grandmother. The memories remained, untouched by the centuries of suffering he had endured. Now, after so long, he would finally see her again. Suddenly, Nori stopped in her tracks. She pointed ahead, her excitement evident. Tun frowned, irritated by the sudden halt. He questioned her impatience, warning her not to anger him. But she was unfazed, her voice trembling slightly as she made an announcement they had arrived. Before them stood nothing but ruins. What was once Xian's office was now nothing more than a collapsed building, its remains scattered across the ground like a graveyard of shattered stone and steel. Tun's expression shifted instantly. His face, usually unreadable, darkened with an emotion that had long been buried fear. He demanded to know who was responsible for this. Meanwhile, a military vehicle sped through the streets. Inside, Serena sat alongside Suho and the others. The atmosphere was tense. She had conducted a quick investigation and confirmed the truth. Taehyung was not just some wandering individual. The location he had been searching for, Xian's office, had led her to the exact same person. She laughed, shaking her head in disbelief. His name, Taehyung, translated as pervert. A beast capable of killing level 6 monsters with a single strike carried such a ridiculous name. Suho, who had been amused at first, now looked at her with an unreadable expression. He reminded her that, despite the humor, the situation was incredibly serious. It wasn't just about a powerful entity appearing out of nowhere. It was far more dangerous than that. Snatching the tablet from her hands, he quickly scanned the data. The information on Taehyung's background was shocking. He wasn't an official awakened individual. There were no records of him in any of the databases. According to the files, he was just an ordinary student at a Korean university, not even awakened, just a regular young man. The only family connection listed was an aunt. Serena, taken aback, recalled an old dispute between two guilds, the Daega Guild and the Ohm Guild. Upon hearing this, Suho's entire demeanor shifted. Fear flickered in his eyes. This was very bad. If Taehyung got involved, the situation could escalate into a massacre. They needed to act quickly. At that moment, in the ruins of Xian's office, Taehyung's heart pounded with rage. The devastation before him was unbearable. The destruction of the place that connected him to his past was something he could not forgive. Nori, standing beside him, had pulled up additional information on her phone. She hesitated, then quietly admitted that she wasn't entirely sure of the details. However, there had been a conflict between guilds, a dispute that had escalated to this. They had rushed to stop the fighting, but it was already too late. Several buildings had collapsed, and many lives had been lost. Tun stepped forward, his movements slow but deliberate. He reached down and picked up a tattered sheet of paper from the rubble. The edges were burned, the ink faded, but the image on it was unmistakable. A photo his grandmother had cherished. Memories rushed back in fragments. He could hear her voice, see her gentle smile, the warmth of her embrace. He remembered calling out to her, his voice filled with joy. He had hugged her tightly, and she had laughed, telling him how much he had grown. She had asked if he had eaten well that day. Another flash of memory. He was pushing a cart filled with groceries. His grandmother, watching him, remarked on how strong he had become. She had thanked him for always helping her. Another scene played in his mind. She gestured proudly to her home, a small but cozy apartment. She told him how grateful she was, how everything she had was because of him. He had brushed off her words, telling her to wait a little longer. He had promised her something better. He had wanted to give her a new home, to live with her, to take care of her, and now that future was gone. Nori, watching from the side, felt a deep unease. She could sense his emotions, his grief, his sorrow, and then his anger. A wild, uncontrollable rage burned in his eyes. Who had done this? Who were the inhuman monsters responsible? At that moment, Suho called out to him, approaching cautiously. His voice was measured, but there was a clear sense of urgency. He introduced himself as a member of the White Tiger Division of the National Intelligence Agency. He requested to speak with him. Even from a distance, he could feel the sheer pressure emanating from Taehyung. It was unlike anything he had encountered before. His instincts told him that the man before him was at least a Class S or perhaps even higher. Taehyung, without turning around, gave a short response. He wasn't in the mood to talk. If they valued their lives, they should leave. Suho, keeping his composure, bowed his head in respect. His tone shifted, becoming even more urgent. He told Taehyung that they knew what had happened. They were currently investigating the incident. The perpetrators had come from the Awakened Alliance. They hadn't yet been identified, but their involvement was certain. Tun stood in silence for a long moment. Then, with a cold expression, he turned away. That was enough. Suho, confused by the abrupt reaction, asked where he was going. Taehyung, his voice filled with deadly calm, replied, he was going to visit the Awakened Alliance. The weight of his past and the emotions he had long buried surfaced in an instant. As Taehyung looked at Nuri, who had risked everything to stop him, he felt something shift within him. The rage that had threatened to consume him wavered, replaced by a long-forgotten sense of purpose. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind, be a good boy, grow strong, and help people. He had spent centuries in hell, hardened by battles and betrayal, but in this moment, he realized why he had come back. His return wasn't just about vengeance, it was about protecting the people who still mattered. He gently placed a hand on Nori's head, his expression softening as he thanked her. Because of her, he had remembered, but his mercy had limits. He turned back to the soldiers and the awakened present, his voice regaining its commanding edge. Since they were all under his authority now, he would not join the Awakened Alliance, but he was willing to cooperate on one condition. They had 3 days to find out who was responsible for his grandmother's death. With a flick of his hand, he conjured a massive magical clock, its ominous ticking marking the countdown. The terms were non-negotiable. If they failed, he would personally ensure justice was served. Meanwhile, at the National Intelligence Agency headquarters in Seoul, the atmosphere was tense. The commander stormed into Suho's office, furious that he had not been informed sooner. His voice echoed through the room as he demanded answers. Where had Suho been? Why hadn't they contacted him? Did he even understand how worried they had been? But more than anything, what mattered most to him was how they had managed to stop the enemy. His voice trembled, not just with anger, but with fear. Sunho, still reeling from the sheer scale of what had just transpired, assured the commander that he would provide a detailed report the following day. The commander, however, was not satisfied with mere promises. He demanded to know who this man was. Was he even a properly classified awakened individual? The squad leader hesitated for a moment before responding, explaining that Taehyung was an unregistered awakened that they had encountered during the battle. Thanks to him, they had been able to take down a level 6 enemy, something that should have been an impossible feat. The commander's expression twisted in disbelief. If this person was unregistered, then protocol demanded that he be subjected to proper testing and documentation. There was no way they could allow an unidentified awakened one, who had already demonstrated such unparalleled power, to walk freely without understanding the full extent of his abilities. However, Sunho, who had seen Taehyung in action, felt an unease settle in his chest. Did they seriously want to test the Demon King? The very notion sent a chill down his spine. When this information was relayed to Taehyung, he did not react with concern or irritation, but rather with a mild, almost mocking amusement. He gestured toward himself and questioned their logic. Test him? The very idea was laughable. A smirk tugged at his lips as he repeated the words, test me, before shaking his head. It was utterly ridiculous. Nevertheless, the order had been given, and soon, Taehyung and Serena found themselves at the testing facility, a sprawling complex filled with awakened hopefuls and officials alike. The sheer number of people within the building made Taehyung frown in mild annoyance. There were far too many. When he asked why, Serena explained that most of these individuals were simply hopefuls, regular people who had come to see if they possessed any awakened abilities. This did not improve his mood. Taehyung, crossing his arms, asked with irritation if they truly expected him to wait in line like some common participant. Serena, sensing the dangerous shift in his mood, immediately assured him that she would speak to the receptionist and get him tested as soon as possible. The last thing she needed was for him to lose his patience in a crowded public space. When she approached the receptionist and explained the situation, the woman nodded in understanding. However, she regretfully informed Serena that despite his strength, he would still have to wait. The line was long, and the facility followed strict protocols. Nori, overhearing this, nearly had a heart attack. She silently prayed that Taehyung would not hear those words, but she was too late. The moment the receptionist uttered them, his expression darkened considerably, his voice, now carrying an unmistakable edge of danger, questioned whether they actually dared to make him wait because of these insignificant people. Nori pleaded silently, begging him not to kill anyone. But before anyone could act, a sudden wave of pressure filled the room. In an instant, every single person collapsed to the floor, crushed by his sheer aura alone. Taehyung, now looking down at them with disdain, commanded them to move aside. There was no point in wasting time with the weak. If the facility's testing personnel were not afraid, then they should begin immediately. Inside the testing arena, Taehyung stood in the center of a vast chamber where a measuring sphere hovered, glowing faintly. An employee's voice echoed through the room, instructing him to focus his magic on the device. This sphere was specifically designed to gauge the magical energy levels of awakened individuals, and all he needed to do was unleash his power against it. Taehyung glanced at the sphere, analyzing it for a moment. If he were to strike with his full power, not only would the sphere shatter, but the entire building would be destroyed. He decided to hold back, just enough to avoid causing structural damage. Extending his hand, he simply commanded the sphere to explode, but nothing happened. A brief flicker of confusion passed across Taehyung's face. Had he done something wrong? His spell was flawless. He tried again, but once more, nothing happened. The testing employee reassured him, instructing him to remain calm and simply focus. Taehyung's patience snapped. Without hesitation, he struck the sphere directly with his bare hand, and in an instant, it shattered into dust. A powerful magical explosion echoed through the room, and the testing personnel stared in stunned horror. The measuring sphere, one of the strongest known magical testing devices, had been completely obliterated. The facility's strongest S-class, Awakened, Anderson, had only managed to put a small crack in the sphere during his own test. Taehyung had reduced it to nothing in a single blow. The employee, visibly trembling, stammered into the microphone that they would need to proceed to the next phase of testing, but Taehyung had already lost interest. His expression hardened as he turned toward the terrified employees. There was no need for further testing. If their strongest equipment had already failed against him, there was nothing left to measure. His power was beyond anything they could comprehend. Fixing his gaze on the trembling staff, he demanded his results immediately. There was no point in continuing. Me, watching the chaos unfold with amusement, let out a light chuckle. He had finished the testing so quickly, hers had taken far longer. She grinned playfully, teasing him about the experience. Wasn't it fascinating to witness how the facility analyzed awakened abilities? With a smirk, she casually mentioned that there was a cafe nearby she liked to visit after training. She suggested they go there, but curiosity still lingered in her expression. By the way, how did he feel about the testing? For the first time that day, Taehyung smiled. The testing had been so dull that Taehyung nearly found himself yawning. He had expected something more challenging, something that would at least hold his interest for a few moments, but instead, all he got was a series of pointless exercises that barely measured even a fraction of his true capabilities. The only real surprise came when the head of the facility reviewed the results and promptly assigned Taehyung an S rank, placing him at the very top of South Korea's awakened hierarchy. It was a predictable outcome, yet the formal acknowledgement did little to impress him. Afterward, he found himself sitting in a quiet cafe with Nori, his fingers idly tapping against the rim of his cup. Taking a sip of the green tea, his expression turned slightly sour. Had tea always been this bitter? Noticing his reaction, Nori, with a bright smile, pushed her own drink toward him and asked if he wanted to try hers. He took her glass and tasted it, noting with some surprise that it was actually pleasant. It wasn't something he would normally care about, but compared to the bitter liquid in his own cup, it was a welcome change. Nori, still curious, asked with a playful smile what type of awakened one he was. She speculated that he was probably a body enhancement specialist, given his absurd physical strength. Taehyung, arms crossed, replied that they would likely classify him as a magic type, since he hadn't even used his true power since returning. In fact, he had been solely relying on body-enhancing spells, even during the testing phase. He had been so consumed by nostalgia after returning that he hadn't bothered focusing on the trivial details. Some of his strongest abilities couldn't even be used outside the demonic realm, making it clear just how different this world was. Nori, surprised, noted that it was strange for someone with his power to be restricted in any way. Did that mean he was capable of using even more terrifying magic? Taehyung dismissed her thoughts, telling her to stop coming up with nonsense. He could see everything she was thinking. Still, he thought to himself that if he could just summon his castle, things would be much simpler. However, it would take time. If he summoned it now, this small building would be crushed like an insect beneath his heel. Before the conversation could continue, Serena and the boss of the facility suddenly entered the cafe. The latter, visibly excited, rushed toward Taehyung with a formal announcement his rank had been officially recorded. As the first ever S-class awakened in South Korea, Taehyung had now been granted an official title. Nori, eyes wide with admiration, exclaimed that it was amazing, her voice filled with excitement. Taehyung, however, remained completely unmoved. There was nothing surprising about this outcome. The results were already obvious. It would have been more shocking if he had been assigned any other rank. However, he knew that Serena and the boss hadn't come just to congratulate him. They had a reason for seeking him out. He demanded they get to the point and say what they really wanted from him. The boss, clearly thrilled, finally spoke. He proposed that Taehyung officially declare his S-rank status to the public. Doing so would bring him fame, power, and significant government support. Tae-hyung, barely interested, listened patiently before responding with a single word, "No." Serena gasped in shock. She couldn't believe he was turning down such a golden opportunity. If he announced his rank, he would gain unparalleled influence. But Tae-hyung was uninterested in fame or wealth. He found the idea annoying. If he needed money, he would simply earn it himself. He had already agreed to assist them, and that alone should be enough. His cooperation was contingent on one thing: his condition. As long as they fulfilled his demand, he would keep his end of the deal. Suho, watching from the sidelines, clenched his fists. They needed to act fast. The 3-day deadline was almost up. If they didn't identify the true culprit behind Xian's office destruction, then Tae-hyung would take matters into his own hands, and that would mean absolute carnage. 3 days later, Tae-hyung and Nori arrived at a massive mansion, one of the many properties provided for his temporary stay. Nori, eyes sparkling with amazement, marveled at the sheer size of the estate. She admitted that she had never seen such a grand house before. Tae-hyung, however, barely reacted. To him, this was nothing compared to his true castle. But still, for now, it would do. As the deadline loomed, Suho arrived at the mansion's gates, only to hear strange noises from inside. Frowning, he moved closer and wondered what was going on. Inside, Tae-hyung and Nori were in the middle of a training session. Tae-hyung, watching her closely, ordered Nori to attack with everything she had. She dashed toward him at high speed, her movements sharp and precise, but her strikes were still too weak. Tae-hyung effortlessly parried each attack, barely moving as he countered her blows with minimal effort. Nori, refusing to back down, launched herself into the air and attempted an overhead strike. However, Tae-hyung casually caught her weapon with his fingers and, with a gentle flick of his wrist, sent her flying across the training ground. She crashed to the floor but quickly scrambled back up. Tae-hyung, sensing her frustration, called for a break. She wasn't ready yet, but she was improving. Handing her a towel, he acknowledged that if she continued training at this pace, she might one day reach the level required to serve as one of his subordinates. To be in his ranks, one had to be at least S-class. Nori, still catching her breath, hesitated before asking a crucial question. Today was the last day of the deadline. Was he truly going to kill everyone in the Awakened Alliance? Tae-hyung, his expression turning dark, looked at her with a wild and unreadable gaze. The deadline ends, no mercy left. Tae-hyung regarded Nori with cold determination. The deadline he had given them was up. There was no longer any reason to expect mercy. His voice was unwavering as he declared that they had been given enough time. He would no longer wait. Nori, bowing her head, tried once more to reason with him. Their lives mattered too. She wasn't just pleading for the guilty, but for the innocent people who might get caught in the crossfire. The demon lord was momentarily taken aback. He had not heard those words in centuries. The demon realm was a land where life was worth nothing, where the weak perished without a second thought. There, survival was everything, and only those with absolute power could claim to rule. To Nori, a life was something to be protected, but to Tae-hyung, it was a tool, one to be used or discarded depending on its worth. Placing a firm hand on her shoulder, his tone was softer than before, but no less certain. This wasn't just mindless slaughter. This was vengeance. This was justice. This was a necessary measure to prevent another tragedy from happening. When one innocent soul perishes, another survives. It was an unavoidable truth. Nori, swallowing her fear, nodded. She understood. But understanding did not mean accepting. Tae-hyung, watching her closely, recognized something strange within himself. Had he become so lenient? He had never before found the need to explain himself to anyone. He was changing, saying unnecessary things, and all because of this girl. His thoughts were interrupted as Sonho approached, calling out to him while clutching a folder of documents. Without turning around, Tae-hyung remarked that Sonho could have called. Hadn't he been taught how to use a phone? Sonho, somewhat sheepishly, admitted that he had wanted to meet in person. But more than that, his eyes lingered on Nori, noting how much she had changed in just a few days. It was as if she had become a different person altogether. Could it be because of Tun? He didn't dwell on it and instead quickly shifted back to business, knowing that wasting the Demon Lord's time was dangerous. Apologizing for the delay, Sonho explained that, as promised, they had found the perpetrators. He handed the folder to Tae-hyung, revealing the ringleaders of the attack on Xian's office. They were members of the Ome Guild. Originally a notorious criminal gang, the Wee gang had transformed into an awakened guild after their leader Gil became an awakened one himself. Despite carrying the title of an awakened guild, their true nature never changed. They were nothing more than a group of ruthless criminals. They tortured innocent civilians, terrorized communities, and used their connections to avoid consequences. Even national intelligence had been forced to tolerate their existence due to their ties with the Awakened Association. Tae-hyung, flipping through the documents, smirked. People like this existed everywhere. Sunho, aware of what was about to happen, handed him the folder directly, stating that now, Taehyung could get rid of them without dirtying his own hands. Suho, listening in, suddenly realized something. They had never even considered this possibility. If the Guild was as despicable as Taehyung claimed, then eliminating them would be a public service. But before they could react, Taehyung's decision had already been made. His voice was cold. Merciless, they would wait no longer. Vengeance was near. The wrath of the Demon Lord Guild's end inside his office. Gil, the leader of the Guild, was relaxing. With a smug grin, he happily declared that they had taken full control of the plaza. Soon, they would eliminate all unprofitable businesses and introduce new franchises. This was how real power worked. Business was nothing more than a battlefield, and he was its conqueror. He laughed, boasting that, thanks to the National Intelligence Service, who tirelessly worked to protect the country, even ordinary people like them could become rich. He never once considered that his own sins would soon come back to haunt him. Without warning, explosions erupted outside. Magic orbs crashed into the building, shaking its very foundation. The air filled with the sound of crumbling stone and fire, and the screams of his subordinates filled the halls. Gil bolted from his chair, his arrogance shattered in an instant. His guild members ran to his office, shouting in panic, asking if he was safe. They rushed outside to assess the situation, but what they saw froze them in terror. Standing above them, perched on the rooftop, was a lone figure. The Demon Lord had come. With a voice that shook the night, Taehyung declared that they would atone for their sins. His golden eyes gleamed with pure fury, his silhouette surrounded by black flames. One of the guild members, trembling, muttered in disbelief. Someone was standing in the fire. He wasn't just unharmed, he was part of it. Without hesitation, Taehyung called out to the guild, demanding that they repent. If they admitted their sins and bowed their heads, he would grant them a painless death. Gil, however, was not a man who would bow. Clenching his fists in rage, he shouted that it was all because of this bastard. This one man had come to ruin everything. He ordered his men to attack. One of the fighters, eager to prove himself, charged forward, seeing this as an opportunity to rise in rank. He never got the chance. Before he could react, Taehyung landed directly on him, triggering a massive explosion. The fighter's body was incinerated in an instant. The rest of the guild members stared in horror as Taehyung's expression darkened. This was their last chance. They had been given mercy, and they had thrown it away. One of the fighters, gripped by terror, turned on his heels and attempted to flee. Taehyung, watching in amusement, casually lifted a massive metal beam from the rubble. With unnerving ease, he hurled it across the battlefield. The fleeing fighter barely had time to scream before the beam struck him, crushing his body in an instant. Taehyung sneered. Who had told them they could escape? The battlefield descended into chaos. The guild members were now scrambling, desperate to save themselves, but none of them would leave alive. Amidst the carnage, Gil, realizing that all was lost, made the coward's choice. He ran. He pushed past his own men, abandoning them, screaming for his fighters to hold Taehyung back while he made his escape. Taehyung, watching this with cold amusement, smirked. The guild leader, the so-called boss, had deserted his own subordinates. This world was no different than the demon realm. Power ruled all, and weaklings perished. Meanwhile, in a hidden room, Gil sat trembling, clutching a bag full of magic stones, muttering in panic. Had they made a mistake? Maybe it was because of what they had done to Xian's office. Maybe it was because they had angered the wrong man. But it was too late for regret. Because the Demon Lord had already arrived. The end of the Guild. No mercy left. Gil, still shaken, had hoped his subordinates would be able to clean up the mess, but deep down, he knew it was a desperate hope. When one of the remaining fighters approached him, voice trembling, he asked how many people were still available. Gil, his face filled with frustration and panic, ordered all the awakened members to gather. If they could lure the intruder into a tight space, they might have a chance to overwhelm him. Even if he was stronger than an rank hunter. Within minutes, a large group of warriors entered the room, their weapons drawn, their eyes burning with forced determination. They were ready to fight, but before Gil could give the order, Taehyung appeared before them. It happened so fast that no one even saw him move. The moment they laid eyes on him, every fighter charged at once, determined to strike him down. But Taehyung, smiling with dark amusement, only muttered that this was perfect. The more opponents, the better. It only meant he wouldn't have to waste time hunting them down one by one. The battle was over before it had even begun. Taehyung tore through them like a storm, his movements too fast to follow, his strikes too devastating to block. Each enemy fell in seconds, their attacks proving utterly useless. Within moments, the once crowded room was filled with fallen bodies, and not a single one of them remained standing. Standing amidst the destruction, Taehyung turned his gaze to a large metal door at the back of the room. His golden eyes narrowed. He knew exactly where the rat was hiding. With one swift motion, he obliterated the door, blowing it apart with a force that sent debris flying in all directions. He stepped into the room with a slow, deliberate pace, his expression merciless. He muttered under his breath, almost mockingly, "Rats always hide, don't they?" Inside, a lone fighter had collapsed on the floor, his face twisted in terror. He had witnessed the impossible. This man had slaughtered an entire group of awakened fighters single-handedly. He was a monster. In a desperate attempt to escape, he crawled toward the metal door, pounding on it with trembling fists, screaming that it wouldn't open. Tae-hyung stepped forward, seized the man by the head, and lifted him effortlessly into the air. His voice was filled with cold fury as he reminded the man that he had sacrificed innocent lives without hesitation. Yet now he begged for his own. With one swift motion, Tae-hyung slammed the man against the wall, crushing his skull instantly. The body slid to the ground, lifeless. From across the room, Gil watched in horror. He had never felt fear like this before. He stammered, asking why this was happening to them. Why was Tae-hyung doing this? The demon lord turned his cold gaze on him and stated his purpose clearly. He wanted to wipe the Ohm Guild off the face of the earth. But, out of curiosity, he asked Gil to give him just one reason why he should be spared. Gil, his mind racing, realized with dread that Tae-hyung hadn't come here for some random reason. This was personal. In a last-ditch attempt to save himself, Gil forced a smile and claimed they had no choice. It had all been self-defense. Tae-hyung's expression darkened. Self-defense? They were the ones who attacked first. The Ohm Guild had never given their enemies a chance to fight back. Did Gil really think he wouldn't know the truth? But Gil wasn't done yet. His hand twitched behind his back, gripping a hidden blade. He knew he was outmatched, but maybe, just maybe, he could land a single hit. If he did, he could create an opening and escape. Feigning submission, Gil suddenly dashed forward, attempting to stab Tae-hyung directly in the face. He screamed that he wasn't just going to sit and accept his fate, he would fight for his life. The blade struck Tae-hyung's cheek. Nothing happened. The weapon didn't pierce his skin, not even a scratch. Tae-hyung grinned, an unhinged gleam in his eyes. He tilted his head slightly and told Gil that he'd give him 1 minute. That was his last chance. Let him try again. Gil, now frantic, launched attack after attack, putting everything he had into striking him down. His hidden blade became a blur, stabbing dozens of times, aiming for weak points: the throat, the heart, the eyes. None of it mattered. Not a single attack landed. Tae-hyung didn't even flinch. As Gil's panic grew, Tae-hyung's mind drifted elsewhere. He hadn't returned to this world for power. He hadn't come back to play games with fools like this. There was only one reason he was here: his grandmother. And for her, he would show no mercy. Gil screamed that this was going to hurt. Tae-hyung moved so fast that Gil didn't even see it happen. A blade pierced straight through his chest, so fast, so precise, that he could still feel his heart beating for a brief moment before it stopped. With his last strength, Gil tried to crawl away, tears streaming down his face. He begged for mercy, promising to give everything he had. Tae-hyung's eyes burned with hatred. Mercy? Slowly he approached, towering over the dying man, and then he finished him off. Aftermath: the unstoppable S-Class. The police arrived at the scene of destruction, taking in the horrifying aftermath. The Ohm Guild had been completely wiped out. 52 people, all dead. The once feared criminal syndicate was now nothing more than a blood-stained ruin. A high-ranking official, standing amidst the wreckage, looked at the massacre with an uneasy expression. His voice was tense as he stated the obvious: they were in deep trouble. One of his subordinates asked a chilling question. Were they just going to pretend this didn't happen? This wasn't a simple case of murder. This was a massacre. A single man had killed an entire guild. 52 people. Gone. One of the officials laughed nervously. How were they even supposed to punish an S-Class awakened with an atomic bomb? They were a country of law and order. They couldn't allow vigilante justice to go unchecked. But the real concern wasn't the massacre itself. The discussion quickly turned to something even more pressing. In recent weeks, the number of dimensional gates had increased 12-fold. In just 1 week, there had been 4 new gates in Seoul alone. Worse, the monsters that emerged weren't ordinary ones. They were 4th and 6th level threats, more bloodthirsty and savage than ever before. Their awakened forces weren't strong enough to handle them. They were lucky to have at least one S-Class, but that didn't mean he was unstoppable. They would let him continue for now, but he needed to understand something. They were watching him, and if Tae-hyung thought he could do whatever he wanted, he was wrong. For the fate of their country was now in the hands of a man who answered to no one. An awkward encounter and a silent struggle after the massacre of the Ohm Guild. Tae-hyung had fallen into an unusual silence, keeping to himself for days. Nori, observing his uncharacteristic quietness, couldn't help but wonder if he was struggling with the weight of his actions. She remembered the head of the intelligence agency kneeling before her, begging her to calm him down. But how was she supposed to console a man like him? As she folded his freshly laundered clothes, she noticed something peculiar. His closet was filled with identical shirts. They were all the same color, the same style. The agency had clearly provided him with basic necessities, but they had done so without any taste or creativity. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her mind. With a cheerful expression, she suggested that they go shopping. They both needed new clothes, and maybe a change of scenery would help lift his mood. Taehyung, unexpectedly, agreed without protest, though he added one condition which made Nori momentarily panic. Was he really already sick of shopping before even going? She quickly realized the truth when Taehyung bluntly stated that he had no money. Nori, exhaling in relief, offered to lend him some, but instead of accepting, Taehyung raised his hand, conjured a portal, and summoned a massive gemstone, a magic stone of immense value. With a casual smirk, he declared that a lord does not need to borrow money. Selling this would be more than enough. The exchange and the unexpected revelation. They arrived at the exchange center, a facility run by the National Intelligence Agency, where hunters and awakened ones exchanged the valuable materials they had collected from monsters for money. Taehyung explained that this wasn't just a private establishment, it was also used by the Awakened Association, making it a critical part of Korea's economic system for dealing with awakened-related resources. Upon entering, they were greeted by a staff member who politely asked what kind of gemstone they wanted to sell and requested to see the item for appraisal. Taehyung calmly handed over the massive magic stone, which made the employee's eyes widen in shock. She immediately radioed her superior, informing him that someone had brought in an unusually large gemstone. Sonho, irritated at being interrupted over what he assumed was a low-grade magic stone, initially dismissed the concern until he was told just how massive it was. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, he ordered the staff to bring them directly to his office. Once inside, Sonho, dressed in an expensive suit and clearly enjoying his role in the financial sector, greeted Nori first, recognizing her as an intelligence officer. However, when he turned his gaze to Taehyung, his tone immediately turned condescending. He mocked him, assuming he was some vagrant who had wandered into the exchange. They couldn't let just anyone walk in off the streets after all. It would tarnish their reputation. Taehyung, unfazed by the insult, casually placed the gemstone on the table. The billion-dollar transaction or not? The moment Sonho laid eyes on the gemstone, his entire demeanor shifted. His jaw dropped, and his breath hitched. This wasn't just a magic stone, it was a nugget of pure energy, something he had never seen before in his life. He muttered in disbelief, questioning whether this was even real. Taehyung, maintaining his usual calm, simply asked how much they would pay for it. Sonho, still in shock, apologized profusely they couldn't pay for something this valuable immediately. This kind of transaction would require approval from the central bank, and even then, it would take time. Taehyung, displeased, didn't argue. Instead, he broke the gemstone into smaller pieces with his bare hands, causing even more shock to Sonho. Even smaller fragments of the gemstone were still worth billions, something only a handful of awakened individuals had ever sold. Sonho, struggling to process the situation, admitted that they could buy a small portion of the stone, but only after negotiating with the Ministry of Finance. However, that would take even more time. Taehyung, his patience waning, frowned. This was the largest exchange facility in Korea, and they couldn't even buy one gemstone? Nori, frustrated by the delay, shouted that they needed the money now. Couldn't they at least pay part of it up front? Sonho, sweating nervously, shook his head. That's not how it worked. But one thing was certain, Taehyung had just shaken the financial world in a way they had never seen before. The power of money and an unexpected challenge. Despite Sonho's reluctance, Nori knew how to pressure him into a deal. She reminded him that the planning bureau permitted nuggets to be purchased for less than their appraised value under certain conditions. If he played his cards right, he could earn a massive profit from this exchange. Would he really pass up the opportunity to make $1 billion right now? Sonho, visibly displeased, hated being cornered like this. It wasn't just about money. This deal could cause problems for the bureau. However, as he met Taehyung's unyielding gaze, he realized he had no choice. Reluctantly, he agreed to the deal. Nori and Taehyung left the exchange, walking down the street as she checked her phone. Seeing the 1 billion credit confirmation, she grinned. The money had arrived. Now they could finally go shopping. She declared that their first stop would be finding clothes for him, to which Taehyung, in his usual detached manner, casually remarked that she had been quite good at persuading that clerk. Meanwhile, back in his office, Sonho sat fuming. How dare they manipulate him like that? He would not let this go. With a scowl, he picked up his phone, called an unknown contact, and muttered coldly that he needed someone to deal with a couple of scumbags. A transformation in more ways than one inside the luxurious clothing store. Nori was beaming with excitement. She dragged Taehyung forward, pointing toward a section of high-end suits with an almost childlike enthusiasm. Taehyung, remaining as indifferent as ever, told her to buy whatever she wanted, since he didn't need anything. But Nori wasn't having it. They were here for him, and she wasn't about to let him leave without dressing properly. She grabbed his hand, pulled him toward the racks, and cheerfully insisted that he should let her help him dress elegantly. Taehyung, amused by her energy, found himself thinking that the more he got to know her, the more interesting she became. She was not like the others, and that made him curious. They approached the counter, where an employee greeted them with a professional smile. Nori, wide-eyed with admiration, pointed at a suit and demanded they bring it to him. After some time, Taehyung stepped out, dressed in a finely tailored suit. Nori, filled with pure joy, ordered the employees to make sure he was dressed perfectly from head to toe. When the final adjustments were done, the staff admired their work. The suit fit him flawlessly, enhancing his commanding presence. Taehyung, inspecting his reflection, admitted he was not used to wearing such clothes. "What did she think?" he asked, his tone neutral. Nori's reaction was immediate and dramatic. She exclaimed in pure awe, loudly declaring that he looked incredible, practically magnificent. She was proud to tell everyone that he was her master. Taehyung, unfazed by her enthusiasm, merely adjusted his collar and declared that they should leave. Nori, still caught up in excitement, asked if he didn't want to admire himself in the mirror a little longer. Taehyung, with a rare smirk, replied that her words were enough. If she said he looked good, that was all he needed to know. Nori, grinning to herself, thought proudly that she was getting through to him. The arrival of a worthy foe. After finishing their shopping spree, Nori and Taehyung stepped out of the store, satisfied with their purchases. However, their peaceful outing was suddenly interrupted. The sky above them shifted, swirling with violent magical energy. Taehyung's eyes narrowed as he immediately recognized the phenomenon. A dimensional gate had opened. But this one was different. He had never seen a gate like this before. A massive red hand pushed through the portal, its fingers stretching out like claws, forcing the tear in space to widen even further. Nori, stunned and horrified, gasped in realization these were unknown gates. Normally, gates manifested gradually, giving people time to prepare. But these had appeared suddenly, without any warning signs. That meant catastrophic consequences. Taehyung's expression darkened. Judging from the sheer power emanating from the portal, whatever was about to emerge would be stronger than anything they had encountered before. Before anyone could react, a second massive clawed limb emerged from the gate, tearing through the sky. Taehyung, unfazed, called out toward the monster within, telling it to show itself. The air trembled, and with a deafening roar, a colossal red dragon burst forth, its scales glistening like molten fire, its crimson wings spreading wide. The earth shook beneath its massive presence, and its golden eyes, filled with pure rage, scanned the world it had just entered. The director of the intelligence agency, who had just been informed of the incident, urgently demanded a status report. Nori, speaking into her radio, relayed the situation, her voice shaking. They were at the mall when the gates opened, and a huge monster had come through. Fortunately, Taehyung was with them, and they had begun evacuating civilians. The director, clearly alarmed, promised to send backup immediately, but Taehyung wasn't waiting. Watching the massive beast, a slow, savage smile spread across his face. It had been too long. Dragons. Cruel, domineering, insane creatures. Born as demigods, they considered themselves rulers of all things. He had fought such a creature before in the demonic realm, and it had been one of his greatest victories. That dragon had refused to submit, so he had ripped out its throat. Now, another dragon stood before him finally. Finally, a worthy opponent. The weight of a new legend, the mechanical voice of the system announcement echoed through the devastated streets once more, its sterile tone a stark contrast to the sheer chaos that had unfolded moments ago. A heavy silence followed, and then, like a wave, the people collectively exhaled, their tense shoulders relaxing, their stiff movements softening as relief washed over them. The fear that had gripped them just moments before began to loosen its hold. The monster, the unstoppable force that had threatened to raze everything to the ground, was gone. But where? Joan Woo, an awakened B-class hunter from the Awakened Alliance, turned sharply toward Nori, his expression somewhere between disbelief and irritation. His voice was sharp, demanding, "Where is your master, and that monster, where did they go?" His words were laced with frustration, but Nori couldn't answer right away. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. How could she even begin to explain what she had just witnessed? Instead, she simply lifted her gaze toward the sky, her expression unreadable. And then, with a small, breathless smile, she murmured, "They're up there." Joan blinked, his brows drawing together as if he hadn't quite heard her correctly. "Up there?" His head tilted as he followed her gaze, his stomach twisting with unease. "You mean they're still fighting? In the sky?" He knew high-rank Awakens had immense mobility, but to battle at an altitude that high, it was unheard of. Another awakened, standing beside him, scoffed. What kind of ridiculous nonsense is that? What do you expect us to believe? That a gigantic city-raising monster just flew off into space? His eyes narrowed at Nori, hostility flickering behind them. You're asking us to believe that without proof? Have you lost your mind? Nori turned to him, her hands clenching slightly at her sides. She wasn't usually one to engage in arguments, but this time she stood firm. I'm telling the truth, she said, voice steady. But it didn't matter. The man wasn't listening. Enough of this crap, he snapped, jabbing a finger toward another individual standing nearby. He's with the National Intelligence Agency, isn't he? Tell me then, where's the monster? Where's the body? Because if you're expecting us to believe that a battle like that ended without a trace, you've got another thing coming. His voice grew louder, angrier. The Awakened Alliance isn't here to clean up your mess. Or did you think we had nothing better to do? A tense silence settled over the group. Then, with controlled anger, a man in a formal suit stepped forward. That's enough, he said. His voice was calm yet edged with warning. I don't care what position you hold in the Awakened Alliance, you don't get to come here and treat us like this. If you keep pushing, we'll be filing a complaint against you. The hunter Joan Ming laughed bitterly, his fingers still pointed at his target. A complaint? Against me? He sneered. You couldn't even handle your own damn job, and now you're gonna cry to your superiors? He took a step closer, his presence brimming with hostility. Let's get something straight. You think all Awakened are on the same level? You think we follow your orders just because your agency is state-controlled? His voice dropped into something dangerous. Our alliance doesn't answer to your government. The tension was thick enough to suffocate them. But then a new terror appeared. A fireball exploded across the sky. Burning objects rained down from above, trailing smoke and flames like the remnants of a fallen god. The ground beneath them trembled violently, as if the very air had become too heavy for the earth to hold. Gasps and screams filled the streets as one of the bystanders shouted, voice hoarse with a panic. It's falling toward us! Run! The world shattered. A deafening explosion erupted just above the city, fire blooming like a second sun. The sheer force of the blast sent people flying backward, their bodies tumbling like rag dolls as shockwaves rippled outward, flattening trees, shattering glass, and sending debris crashing through the streets. Flames surged toward them, threatening to swallow the very ground they stood on, and then, amidst the inferno, he appeared. Standing unscathed in the center of the raging fire, Taehyung emerged. His silhouette cut through the flames like a specter of destruction, his golden eyes glowing beneath the smoke-filled sky. He stood tall, unaffected, like he had merely taken a casual stroll through the depths of hell. Beside him, the severed head of the dragon lay in ruins, its colossal form reduced to nothing more than a trophy at his feet. For a long moment no one spoke. Serena and Sunho, who had arrived at the scene moments earlier, could do nothing but stare at him in utter disbelief. And Nori, her lips curled into a small, uncontainable smile. Master, she whispered, breathless. Taehyung raised a hand to his head, rubbing his temple as if he had a mild headache. I should have descended more slowly, he muttered to himself. The silence broke like shattered glass. The awakened hunters, the intelligence agents, the civilians, they all turned toward him at once. A sea of shock, fear, admiration, and utter disbelief. The once arrogant Joan Ming stared at him, his mouth slightly open, his fingers twitching at his sides. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. A man had just fallen from the sky with a dragon's head. Someone, a high-ranking agent, stepped forward and muttered under his breath, Who the hell is this guy? Suho, still recovering from the spectacle, took a deep breath and then straightened. He stepped forward and bowed deeply, his tone shifting into something much more respectful. Ting, sir, he said carefully, his voice steady despite the lingering tension in the air. You handled this situation expertly. He hesitated, then added, But we need to talk. Immediately. Taehyung's eyes flickered toward him. He was about to dismiss the request outright, but then he caught the nervous edge in Suho's tone. He wasn't just making small talk, something was wrong. Narrowing his gaze, Taehyung folded his arms. What's this about? Suho swallowed, then nodded to the burning remains of the dragon's head. His voice was urgent, laced with an unspoken warning. Because of this, he said, the whole world now knows exactly how powerful you are. Taehyung raised a brow, his expression unreadable. Suho exhaled sharply. And that means things are about to get much, much more complicated. Taehyung abruptly stated that his interlocutor was too talkative more than just rudeness. He despised wasting time. He insisted they get straight to the point, concluding that they had no choice but to officially announce his existence. Nori, visibly worried, attempted to speak, while the people behind the barrier engaged in discussions about the latest events. One of them, in shock, questioned whether this was the monster from that gate. Had they ever encountered a creature of this size before? Another asked, astonished, if this individual had truly defeated such a monstrous being single-handedly. Taeyong, however, expressed indifference to all of it. Sunho, observing his reaction, felt uneasy. He hadn't expected him to agree. What could he possibly agree on with that kind of monster? It seemed entirely impossible. There were no options. Then, suddenly, Taehyung stated that it wouldn't be difficult for him to agree with him. Taeyong, surprised, questioned whether he had misunderstood. But Taehyung was firm. Taeyong responded, saying they should do what needed to be done. Nervously, he was asked again if he was sure about this decision. Folding his arms, he declared that he shouldn't have to repeat himself. He pointed directly at his interlocutor, emphasizing that he didn't want any unnecessary trouble. Without hesitation, Taeyong activated his abilities, summoning a towering pillar of light. He hoped the reward he offered would be acceptable. The onlookers stared in awe at the massive magic stone that had appeared. Moments later, one of the employees suddenly shouted and turned toward Anderson, who was intently examining some documents. The employee asked whether Anderson had any business with him. Anderson, standing up, was informed that the operation had been cancelled. He demanded an explanation for this abrupt decision. The employee explained, with visible unease, that new information had surfaced according to the latest reports. The high-level monster that had emerged in Korea had already been eliminated. Still looking at his tablet, he elaborated that the being responsible for this feat was an individual who had just been confirmed as Korea's newest S-Class Awakened. Meanwhile, Taehyung, dressed in a tattered suit, remarked that he had only recently bought it, and it was already ruined. Murray, in a cheerful tone, reassured him that they could always buy another one. A bystander looked at Taehyung with curiosity. Who exactly was this person? He had descended from the sky, clutching the head of an enormous monster, and had extracted a crystal from it. Never before had he witnessed a crystal of such size. Nori, now smiling, suggested that next time they should buy him some casual clothes instead. Taeyong, puzzled, asked what casual meant. People, when confronted with something utterly beyond their comprehension, usually reacted in one of two ways. Either they accepted what they saw or denied it outright. One individual, initially in shock, suddenly grinned and claimed to have figured it out. Laughing, he said they were simply playing a prank. Pointing at them with his index finger, he confidently asserted that it was all just an elaborate performance. After all, things like this didn't happen in real life. He nearly believed it himself. Was this some kind of 3D projection? Was this just how advanced technology had become? Sunho, clearly concerned, urged him to calm down and listen. But the man refused. Why should he listen? He argued that it was all a fabrication. Another person attempted to reason with him, explaining that, difficult as it might be to accept, outright denial was even more pointless. The National Intelligence Agency would soon make an official announcement regarding the emergence of a new S-Class Awakened in their country. And that very individual was standing right before them now. Wang, in disbelief, asked whether this was truly real. Raising his voice, he scoffed at the idea. Did they take him for a fool? He sneered, sarcastically adding that he was just as much of an S-Class Awakened as his grandmother. Furious, he declared that he had seen through their scheme. This was all a setup orchestrated by the National Intelligence Agency from start to finish. Their goal? To intimidate the Awakened Alliance by fabricating the existence of a fake S-Class individual. Sunho, frustrated, asked how he could possibly speak of deception when the events had unfolded right in front of everyone. Wang, still skeptical, argued that none of it made sense. A level 7 monster had suddenly appeared in the middle of Seoul, then mysteriously vanished into the sky only for its head to fall back down. Could anyone truly believe such an absurd scenario? People weren't complete fools. Nori, unable to contain her anger, shouted at him to stop. Her master was no fraud. He was a genuine S-Class Awakened. If not for him, she insisted, not only would everyone here be dead, but all of Seoul would have been wiped off the face of the earth. Yet instead of gratitude, Wang had the audacity to call him a fake? Pointing at her with his index finger, Wang sneered. How dare she, a lower-ranking Awakened, interrupt the conversations of the strong? She stared at him, dumbfounded. He scoffed and asked if this was how they trained people in the National Intelligence Agency. Did they even have a proper chain of command? What else could be expected from a department full of scammers and slackers? Standing beside Nori, Taeyong remarked that the man was making too much noise. However, to him, it was just empty sound, meaningless, and not worth his attention. He intended to ignore someone so insignificant. Nori glanced at Taehyung in confusion, but before she could say anything, his expression darkened with anger. Cloaking his body in dark energy, he declared that he couldn't simply overlook the disrespect toward his subordinate. The human stood frozen, nearly speechless. But Taehyung wasn't finished. He made it clear he was not a generous person. This was his only warning. The man had better never insult him or his subordinates again. Wai, trembling with horror, stared at Taehyung, who continued to glare at him threateningly. If his warning was ignored, the consequences would be dire, his death would be painful and excruciating. The weight of the words crushed him, and he collapsed to the ground in fear. With a sigh of arrogance, Taehyung turned away and called for Nori. It was time to leave. She, finally snapping out of her daze, quickly agreed and followed him. Suho looked at Wai with a mixture of fear and pity. Wai, unable to hold back his emotions, broke into tears, covering his face with his hand. Suho sighed in concern. He didn't even want to think about what this encounter could lead to. It was better not to dwell on it. Sometime later, they returned home. The television broadcast blared breaking news: the National Intelligence Agency had officially registered a new S-class awakened in Korea. The name attached to the announcement was Taeyang Baiti. The news anchor went on to explain that Taeyang had single-handedly defeated a monster from an unknown gate, one that had suddenly opened above a shopping mall in Seoul. The footage played clips of the aftermath, showing destruction and the decapitated monster. Suho turned to Taeyang and remarked that he had now been officially recognized. Taeyang, however, was unimpressed. He reminded Suho that he had specifically asked for no unnecessary trouble. Suho sighed and shook his head. Unfortunately, trouble was unavoidable. After all, you're now the only S-class awakened in the entire country, and there are only 9 of your kind in the whole world. That alone set Taeyang apart from all the lower-level awakened. It wasn't an exaggeration, his strength was absolute. No organization, and certainly no other awakened person in Korea, could challenge him. Suho hoped that meant people would leave Taeyang alone, at least for now. But even as he scratched the back of his head nervously, he admitted there were still concerns. The biggest issue? The complete silence from other countries. Until now, South Korea had been at a disadvantage due to its lack of S-class awakened individuals. The global superpowers, namely the United States, China, and Japan, had always dominated. Korea had been pushed around by them for years, but with Taeyang's awakening, everything had changed. Both the United States and Japan had attempted to force South Korea into massive debt, using the sudden appearance of the unknown gate as leverage. Yet when news broke that the enemy had been eliminated, confusion set in. They had not anticipated this outcome. Nori observed Taeyang's expression carefully. His face remained unreadable, but Suho continued. Of course, their confusion won't last forever. They'll try to restore the balance of power, and that means eliminating any advantage we have. That was why allies were necessary recently. A request had arrived from a special unit of the U.S., Army Wolf. They were highly interested in Taeyang and had formally requested to meet him in person. At this, Taeyang immediately rejected the idea. Suho blinked in shock. Wait, you're refusing? This is an opportunity. We could gain an ally in the United States. Taeyang remained unmoved. He simply stated that he had no interest in any of this. His annoyance was palpable as he clenched his fist. I don't care about so-called powerful people, he muttered. What's really frustrating is that everything I bought on that rare shopping trip is now completely destroyed. He sighed, clearly displeased, and added, I just hope they don't keep bothering me. Nori and Suho exchanged uneasy glances. Mi, watching all of this, racked her brain. What could she say to convince him? She needed a way to make him reconsider. Then, suddenly, an idea struck her. She gasped slightly, then quickly spoke up. Wait, can I ask something? Taeyang turned to her, unimpressed. What is it? The Special Squad Wolf, isn't that the same unit that the S-Class Awakened Anderson is part of? Taeyang's expression didn't change, but she pressed on. He's said to be the strongest among all awakened, isn't he? Suho, seeing where she was going with this, confirmed it. That's right. Anderson, also known as Warlord, is considered the strongest awakened in the world. He then revealed something important. Anderson was actually the one who personally requested to meet you, Taeyang. At this, Taehyung's eyes flickered with interest. Now this was something different. He smirked. Well, that makes things interesting. Without hesitation, he changed his mind. All right, I don't mind going to the meeting after all. Nori was certain now her assumption had been correct. The only people capable of capturing Taeyang's interest were those who matched him in strength. He had no patience for politics, power struggles, or the admiration of others. But someone like Ryan Anderson, the world's strongest awakened, was a different matter entirely. That was why he had so easily agreed to the meeting. It wasn't out of obligation, curiosity, or any sense of duty. It was purely because he wanted to measure Anderson's strength for himself. Sometime later, as they arrived at the airport, Jensen from the U.S. Army's Special Squad Wolf observed their surroundings with amusement, eager to see how they would be received. Chinan, another member of the squad, felt much differently. He was almost exasperated with Jensen's excitement and warned him not to stir up trouble like he always did. Jensen, however, took offense at the implication, questioning why he was always blamed for causing problems. Anderson, as the leader, quickly put an end to the discussion, reminding them that this was an official visit to an allied country. They couldn't afford to cause an incident like they had in the past. The Pentagon had assigned them a mission, and they needed to carry it out with professionalism. His words served as a clear warning that they had no room for mistakes. Jensen, though not one to easily obey orders without complaint, responded with a laugh, playfully promising that he would try not to make a scene. But once their objective was complete, he hinted that they could act freely, implying that restrictions would no longer apply to them. The elite U.S. Army Special Squad Wolf had arrived in South Korea with a purpose. Chenin, a skilled class awakened, reminded them once again that they were not in the country for leisure. The Pentagon had outlined 2 key missions for them. First, to recruit the newly awakened S-Class, and second, to assess his strength. Everything else was secondary. Their primary focus needed to be on the task at hand. Anderson acknowledged this, but there was an underlying tone of finality in his voice when he mentioned that if Taeying refused their offer, that would be the end for him. He didn't elaborate, but the implication was clear: there was no room for negotiation. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Taeying found himself growing bored of waiting for their arrival. He casually pulled out his phone and tuned into a special broadcast that was currently airing live. The news was centered around the S-Class hunter, Ryan Anderson, the very man he was about to meet. According to the report, Anderson was widely recognized as the strongest awakened in the world, a man capable of eliminating enemies strong enough to destroy entire nations. His legendary weapon, Excalibur, was highlighted as the key to many of his victories. As Taeying absorbed this information, he couldn't help but smirk. This man was truly one of the greatest fighters in the world, or so they claimed. Nori, standing beside him, suddenly pointed out that their guests had finally arrived. Taeying's expression shifted, a malicious smile spreading across his lips. Now, things were about to get interesting. Without hesitation, he declared that it was time for them to go. Nori excitedly motioned for him to follow her, thrilled by the prospect of meeting someone she had once idolized. However, she quickly reminded herself that her true master was no longer Anderson, but Taeying. As they made their way toward the meeting, Taeying's thoughts drifted elsewhere. He considered the technological limitations of this world. Unlike the realm he had once been in, Earth had yet to develop the technology necessary to modify the human body on a fundamental level. In the demon realm, he had undergone a procedure known as noise body modification, which had fundamentally altered his being. Because of this, he no longer considered himself a pure-blooded human. He had encountered countless formidable entities in the demon realm, yet none of them had been purely human. This meeting would provide him with an opportunity to test the strength of a true, unaltered human, the strongest one this world had to offer. The thought intrigued him. As they approached the entrance, Nori, still filled with excitement, opened the door for him with a respectful smile, inviting him to step inside. Taeying patted her head absent-mindedly, still lost in his own thoughts. Inside the meeting room, Anderson and Chenin turned toward the newcomers. Almost instantly, Taeying and Anderson locked eyes, and the atmosphere between them grew tense. There was no need for words; their gazes alone conveyed everything. The Director of National Intelligence, Young-gin, took the initiative to break the silence, remarking that they had finally gathered. With a polite demeanor, he introduced himself and extended his hand toward Taeying, mentioning that while he had heard much about him, this was their first official meeting. Though Young-gin expressed his pleasure at finally meeting face-to-face, Taeying completely ignored him. The blatant dismissal caused a wave of tension in the room. Nori, sensing the awkwardness, quickly apologized for Taeying's behavior. Young-gin, trying to maintain professionalism, chuckled and reassured her that it was fine. However, after a moment of hesitation, he retracted his hand, admitting that his primary concern was actually the American guests. Redirecting the conversation, he gestured toward the U.S. representatives, introducing them formally. Chenin was the first to step forward, greeting them in fluent Korean. His ability to speak the language surprised Nori, though she suspected that a translation spell was likely being used. However, while most of the attendees focused on introductions, Jensen was watching Taeying with an expression of disbelief. He couldn't shake the feeling that Taeying considered them beneath him, as though they weren't worth acknowledging. At the same time, Taeying was occupied with something else entirely. He had activated his analysis skill on Anderson. What he discovered was impressive. Anderson's abilities were immense, capable of slaying dragons with ease. That level of power was undeniably remarkable. But before he could analyze further, Jensen, unable to ignore the situation any longer, suddenly stepped forward with a smirk. He made a sarcastic remark about how much attention Taeying was giving Anderson, then, without warning, grabbed Taeying's hand in an attempt to force a handshake. His grip was firm, his intent obvious. He wanted to test Taeying's reaction. He questioned whether Taeying understood the customs of his own country, implying that it was impolite to refuse such an interaction. However, Taeying remained unmoved. Jensen, sensing resistance, tightened his grip, expecting Taeying to either flinch or be forced to acknowledge him. Yet something strange happened. Almost immediately, he felt an unsettling sensation creeping over him, something he couldn't quite identify. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. The shift in energy was palpable. The tension in the room escalated as the air grew heavy. Before Jensen could react, Nori suddenly screamed, her voice filled with panic. She desperately warned him to stop. Ting's grip tightened around Jensen's hand with a crushing force, eliciting a sharp, agonized scream. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension as everyone turned in shock to witness the scene. Jensen, whose usual arrogance left him believing himself untouchable, had never imagined such overwhelming strength from another human. His instincts kicked in, and in a desperate bid to free himself, he activated his explosion skill, a technique that could incinerate anything within reach. The sudden surge of energy sent a blast through the air, causing Nuri to scream in alarm as she instinctively shielded the director with her own body. Sheenan, now furious, clenched his fists and cursed under his breath. Jensen, in his impulsive foolishness, had just ruined everything. But something was wrong. Jensen's explosion skill abruptly ceased, its flames snuffed out as if swallowed by an unseen force. His panic-stricken eyes widened in disbelief his ability had been neutralized. Before he could process what had happened, Tying struck him with a single powerful blow, sending him hurtling across the room like a rag doll. The impact was so forceful that the entire space trembled from the shockwave. Nori winced as the aftershock rippled through the air, nearly knocking her off balance. Anderson, watching the situation escalate, finally intervened. Without hesitation, he activated his abilities, his mere presence shifting the energy in the room. His deep voice rang out as he declared that this had gone on long enough. There was a sharp glint in his eyes as he reached for his weapon Excalibur and drew it in one swift motion, its blade gleaming with a dangerous aura. Despite his obvious discontent with his comrade's actions, he knew Ting's response had been just as excessive. His tone was calm but firm as he apologized on Jensen's behalf, acknowledging his subordinate's rudeness while subtly implying that Ting's reaction had been just as severe. With a level stare, he posed a simple question: was this where they should end it? Tying, standing unfazed amid the tension, let out a sharp grin. He agreed. There was no reason to waste more time on this nonsense. Anderson, satisfied with the answer, slid his weapon back into its sheath and immediately turned to Chinan, instructing him to remove Jensen from the area. Chinan complied with a sigh, already tired of dealing with Jensen's reckless attitude. Meanwhile, Suho, who had been watching everything unfold with increasing anxiety, felt a cold chill creeping down his spine. He had a bad feeling about all of this. There was no way they could avoid further conflict at this rate. His instincts told him this would only escalate, so he decided it would be wise to call for medical support in advance. Nuri, who had been quiet for a moment, suddenly stepped forward with an eager look. With admiration in her eyes, she offered to accompany them to the infirmary, explaining that they had a doctor on standby who could assist with any injuries. Chinan, grateful for the offer, nodded in appreciation. Anderson, ever the professional, turned to Tying once more, this time offering a more formal apology. He explained that Jensen was difficult to control, and hopefully, this incident would serve as a lesson for him. His voice held no fear, no hesitation, only the confident tone of someone who had dealt with countless strong individuals before. Tying, however, had little interest in prolonging the conversation. He made it clear that he hated wasting time on pointless fights. If Anderson had something important to discuss, then he should speak up now rather than continue with useless pleasantries. Anderson took a moment to assess him before finally getting to the real reason for their meeting. He asked Tying directly if he would consider joining them in the United States. Naturally, there would be significant benefits involved: wealth, resources, influence. Everything Tying could ever need or want would be provided if he agreed to work with them. Tying, completely unfazed, refused without a second thought. His voice was sharp, leaving no room for misinterpretation. He had no interest in their offer. Holman, one of the national intelligence officers, immediately erupted in outrage. He practically shouted in indignation, accusing the United States of trying to steal Korea's only S-class awakened. His voice echoed through the room as he demanded answers, his tone filled with both anger and panic. Anderson, caught off guard by the reaction, looked genuinely surprised. Had he misheard something? Tying, now visibly losing patience, warned them not to make him repeat himself. His rejection had been final. He had no intention of discussing it further. However, deep down, he had been waiting for this outcome. There was no real reason for him to work with them. He had no desire for alliances or diplomatic games. What he was truly interested in was testing Anderson's strength. He could see it in Anderson's eyes as well, the same curiosity, the same hunger for a challenge. Without hesitation, he coated his entire body with mana, making his intentions crystal clear. Wasn't Anderson just as interested in seeing who was stronger? If that was the case, then they should settle it with their fists. Anderson's lips curled into a smile. It was an excellent idea. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, an exhausted medic had just finished healing Jensen's injured arm with his abilities. As the energy flowed through his limb, the pain gradually faded, but Jensen was far from grateful. He turned to Chinon with a scowl, his voice filled with frustration as he blamed him for what had happened. Crossing his arms, he continued to sulk, refusing to take responsibility for his own reckless actions. But Chinon had no patience for his nonsense. With a sharp tone, he made it clear that this was Jensen's own fault. Jensen's anger flared, and he shouted with frustration, his words laced with resentment. He ranted about how the new S-class had no respect for anyone, questioning how someone like Tying could act so arrogantly, even in the presence of the world's strongest awakened. How could Anderson remain so calm after such an insult? Did he not feel humiliated? Chinon's response was simple. What reaction was he expecting? Tying was one of the strongest S-class awakened in existence. It was only natural for someone at his level to be arrogant. Strength justified arrogance, and Tying had proven that he was worthy of it. Jensen fell silent, the memory of Tying's overwhelming power replaying in his mind like a nightmare. Chinon, seeing his hesitation, decided to drive the point home. Their team wasn't powerful because of people like Jensen. They were strong only because of Anderson. Jensen, in truth, was just lucky he had been born with a powerful ability, but that didn't make him truly skilled. He needed to remember his place. Jensen lashed out in response, shouting that he already knew all of this. But that didn't change his frustration. He still refused to acknowledge Tying's power. There was no way that someone from such a small country could be a real S-class awakened. It was impossible. Nori, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. With irritation in her voice, she reminded them just how lucky they were that things had ended the way they did. If Tying had truly wanted to, he could have killed all of them without breaking a sweat. Chinon and Jensen turned to her, staring in disbelief. Jensen, letting out a laugh, mocked her words. Did she really believe that? Was she seriously comparing Tying to Anderson? His laughter was sharp and condescending as he dismissed her entirely, but Nori stood her ground, her voice unwavering. She knew one thing for certain. Her master Tying was the strongest man in the world. Jensen's laughter only grew louder. The audacity of it amused him beyond belief. With a smirk, he sneered at her declaration, claiming that her foolish dreams would soon be shattered. Anderson was about to put an end to Tying's arrogance, and when he did, the truth would become clear to everyone. Homan sat in stunned silence, trying to piece together how things had escalated to this point. Was this all part of a prearranged test to gauge the true combat strength of the United States forces? Even if it was just a duel, this was still a battle between two S-class awakened. The destructive potential was beyond comprehension. Watching the fight unfold through the monitor, he muttered to himself that, at the very least, they should refrain from demolishing the entire building in the process. Inside the arena, Anderson stood firm, gripping Excalibur tightly in his hand. He turned to Tying and asked whether he planned to fight barehanded. The idea was absurd after all, this was not an ordinary fight. Tying, however, scoffed at the notion, stating that fighting without a weapon against Anderson would be foolish. Despite his overwhelming power, he wasn't arrogant enough to take on a weapon master without one of his own. But there was one key difference: his weapon mastery skill was at level 8, which was essentially godlike in this world. In his eyes, this battle was already decided. As Tying made his decision, a system window materialized in front of him, listing his opponent's skills. Anderson's abilities were undeniably formidable. Heavenly Weapon Mastery level 3, Close Combat level 5, Weapon Aura Kill level 5, and Wind Strike level 5. These were all high-ranking abilities, ones that had secured Anderson's reputation as the world's strongest S-class awakened. However, Tying's weapon mastery alone was level 8. The difference in pure technique was staggering. Smirking, he deliberated on which weapon to use. There was only one correct choice. His mind flashed back to the day he ascended to the top of the demon realm, the moment his most loyal subordinates forged a weapon in his honor. That blade, a symbol of his dominance, would be the one he wielded today. Anderson, watching Tying with sharp eyes, felt a surge of unease as he witnessed a portal open before him. He clenched his jaw. How was he able to open a portal in the middle of the battle? Was this an extension of his mysterious system? Before he could react, Tying casually reached inside and withdrew a colossal blade crackling with raw energy. His expression remained indifferent as he stated that he had finally found a weapon worthy of this duel. He named it Thunderblade, his favorite weapon. Anderson's gaze sharpened. He had never seen a weapon quite like this before. It radiated an overwhelming power, one he could feel even from a distance. However, he wasn't about to be intimidated. He acknowledged Tying's choice, but stated that it was an honor for his opponent to hold his weapon in such high regard. However, Anderson had no intention of backing down. His weapon, Excalibur, was one of the most powerful in existence, capable of cutting down enemies that could wipe out entire nations. He knew he was unmatched in close combat. But at the same time, there was something strange about Tying's fighting style. He wasn't an ordinary warrior, he was a mage. Yet, despite his magical background, he had chosen to rely solely on weapon mastery for this battle. That meant he was confident that his weapon skills alone would be enough to challenge Anderson. Hearing Taiying's words, Anderson narrowed his eyes. Such arrogance. He would make him regret it. With an explosive burst of power, he lunged forward, propelling himself toward his opponent in a single leap. Excalibur sliced through the air, its energy cutting apart everything in its path. The sheer force behind the attack sent shockwaves tearing through the room, strong enough to shatter stone and metal alike. Taiying, however, calmly evaded the attack, his expression barely shifting as he gracefully moved out of range. Homan, still watching through the screen, felt his stomach tighten. The sheer destructive force of their weapons was unreal. How was Anderson able to split the floor of the building with a single swing? If that attack had connected, it could have easily killed a level 7 monster in an instant. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. This was the pinnacle of weapon combat. Taiying, meanwhile, observed Anderson's form with a smirk. Not bad, but not good enough. Anderson, seeing that his opponent had dodged without even blinking, felt his blood boil with frustration. Taiying's calm, arrogant expression was infuriating. He had never met someone who could avoid his attacks so effortlessly. That smirk, it needed to be wiped off his face. Without hesitation, Anderson launched into a flurry of attacks, each strike faster and more precise than the last. His swordsmanship was masterful, his control over Excalibur's power absolute. The sheer speed and intensity of his movements forced even the most skilled warriors to struggle against him. However, Taiying remained composed, parrying each blow with effortless precision. His counterattacks were calculated, his movements fluid and refined. He didn't block, he redirected. Each time Anderson struck, Taiying would adjust the angle of his blade just enough to deflect the force away from himself, ensuring that Anderson's attacks never truly connected. Then, Taiying's grin widened. It was time to raise the difficulty level. In an instant, his speed increased. With a powerful, well-timed strike, he knocked Anderson off balance and sent him crashing into the ground. The impact was deafening. The arena shook as Anderson struggled to get back up, using Excalibur for support. Taiying, standing tall, watched him with satisfaction. This was exactly what he wanted. Anderson was the strongest human. He didn't want the fight to end too soon. Anderson gritted his teeth, gripping his weapon tightly. His mind raced. His opponent's strength was beyond anything he had encountered before. It reminded him of the time he had fought the level 5 demon nicknamed Bone Setter, a monster with a skeleton so dense and unbreakable that even his strongest attacks had barely affected it. That battle had been long and brutal, one of the hardest fights of his life. It was that victory that had solidified his status as an S-Class Awakened. After the battle, he had taken a bone from the fallen monster, and from that material Excalibur had been forged. It was a weapon that could never be broken, and as its wielder, Anderson knew that he himself must never be broken either. Refusing to stay down, Anderson rose to his feet once more, his grip on Excalibur tightening. His determination was unwavering. Taiying smiled. That was more like it. Anderson, now fully committed, declared that he acknowledged Taiying's strength. But that didn't mean he would back down. This battle would only end in one way: death. Taiying's grin disappeared, replaced by a cold, furious expression. That was exactly what he wanted. Homan, his hands clutching his head, felt himself spiraling into panic as he watched the fight unfold. This was getting out of hand. Anderson was serious about fighting to the death. There was no way they could allow this to continue. Anderson, his eyes burning with resolve, tightened his grip around Excalibur. He warned Taiying that he should be ready, because this time he would try to kill him. Gathering his energy, he activated his strongest ability. Taiying immediately felt the pressure in the air change. His instincts sharpened something was coming. Anderson lunged forward, his weapon shaking violently, but it wasn't an ordinary vibration. It was something else. It wasn't just a weapon technique, it was something more. Taiying watched with fascination. This ability, it was interesting. Anderson swung Excalibur directly at his neck. Taehyung watched as Excalibur hovered dangerously close to his neck, his gaze unwavering. Instead of fear, his thoughts were filled with excitement. This was exactly what he wanted: to push Anderson to his limits, to make him fight with everything he had. If Anderson truly believed himself to be the strongest awakened, then he had to prove it. Taiying wouldn't settle for anything less. He wanted to see Anderson at his full power. However, there was one problem: if they continued like this, the entire building would be reduced to rubble, and the lives of lower beings would be caught in the crossfire. That thought, while insignificant compared to the thrill of battle, lingered in the back of his mind. Meanwhile, in the control room, Homan was losing his mind. Clutching his head in utter disbelief, he stared at the battle unfolding on the monitor. There was no way this was still a trial fight. This had become something far more dangerous. If either combatant was seriously injured, the repercussions would be severe. An international scandal was already brewing. Desperation creeping into his voice, he shouted that they had to stop them immediately. But how? How could anyone stop two S-class awakened warriors in the middle of a full-powered duel? One of the analysts, adjusting his glasses, turned to the director with an air of grim acceptance. He acknowledged that he agreed with Homan, but their hands were tied. They lacked a third S-class awakened without one. Interfering in this battle was impossible. Stopping monsters of this caliber required another monster. Unfortunately, they had none. That left only one option: pray that the fight would end without a catastrophe. Serena, who had been watching silently, spoke up. She mentioned Tai Hyung's name, expressing her belief that he was fully aware of his own power. He wasn't reckless, he knew how much destruction he could cause, and because of that, he wouldn't allow himself to lose control. There wouldn't be a tragic ending, she was sure of it, but no sooner had the words left her mouth than a deafening crash shook the room. Her confidence wavered, and with a nervous chuckle, she admitted that she could be wrong. Homan, his nerves fraying, hesitated before agreeing with her. Judging by Tai Hyung's actions so far, it seemed like he was actually trying to protect their country. If that was the case, then perhaps Serena was right. Perhaps he wouldn't completely destroy everything. But then again, the way this battle was escalating, nothing was certain. Inside the battlefield, Tying and Anderson clashed violently, their weapons colliding with enough force to send shockwaves through the structure. Each strike shook the very foundation of the building, making the walls groan under the pressure. Serena's face paled in fear. If they didn't stop soon, the entire structure would collapse. Anderson, on the other hand, was consumed by a single thought: he was the strongest awakened. There was no one stronger than him, no one who could surpass him, not in this world, not even Tying. With that belief fueling his actions, he drove his weapon straight into Tai Hyung's stomach. But instead of pain or even shock, Tying smiled. His expression was one of amusement, not fear. He remarked that Anderson was getting carried away. He would love to continue this fight, but there was a problem. By fighting inside this building, they were putting too many people in danger. Tying's eyes narrowed as he teleported next to Anderson in an instant, his movements too fast to track. Anderson, reacting purely on instinct, swung Excalibur, attempting to land another strike. But Tying caught the blade with his bare hand, stopping it effortlessly. Without breaking eye contact, he released a surge of dark energy, coating his entire body in pure, suffocating power. They needed to take this fight elsewhere. Anderson ripped his weapon free, stepping back in stunned silence. What was this overwhelming energy? It wasn't just power, it was killing intent. For the first time, fear crept into Anderson's heart. He tightened his grip on Excalibur, his instincts screaming at him to be on guard. Tying without hesitation unleashed a devastating attack. Anderson barely managed to block, the sheer force sending him skidding backward. As he steadied himself, his thoughts raced. Why was he afraid? It made no sense. He was the strongest awakened in the world. He had faced countless enemies, defeated nightmare-level threats, and won battles that others deemed impossible. And yet, in the presence of Tying's energy, he felt his own mortality like never before. Anderson clenched his jaw. This was unacceptable. This was not possible. This was not reality. His frustration reached its peak as he roared in defiance, charging at Tying once more. He activated Wind Strike, his most lethal technique, and swung his weapon with the full force of his abilities. But just before his attack landed, the battlefield was swallowed in darkness. Tying's dark energy corrupted the very air, creating an oppressive void that absorbed Anderson's ability before it could even take effect. Anderson's expression twisted into one of horror. What kind of power was this? Pain shot through his arm as his own weapon betrayed him, absorbing Tai Hyung's dark energy and turning against him. He screamed in agony, struggling to pull Excalibur back, but the weapon refused to obey. Tying, watching with cold amusement, remarked that pride was a privilege reserved only for the truly strong. Anderson, for all his boasting, had proven himself unworthy. How could he claim to be the strongest in the world when he couldn't even protect himself? With that final declaration, Tying delivered a devastating blow, sending Anderson crashing into the ground. The entire building trembled from the impact. Homan let out a strangled gasp, his face pale with shock. Everyone else in the room was equally stunned. The battle had taken a brutal turn, and now Anderson was struggling to stand. Tying, smiling wickedly, raised his hand in triumph, mocking the fallen warrior. The strongest in the world? What a joke. Outside, chaos erupted as ordinary people fled the crumbling structure. The sheer force of the battle had caused the very earth to shake, and civilians ran in panic as the terrifying sounds of combat echoed in the air. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, Nuri and Jensen felt the pressure of the battle surging through the walls. Jensen, with a smug grin, remarked that the fight had finally begun. He was practically giddy with excitement, taking pleasure in what he believed was Tying's inevitable defeat. Pointing his index finger at Nuri, he cruelly suggested that she should start mourning her master now. He mocked her, stating that her so-called master had no chance against Anderson. By now, Tying was already on his knees, begging for mercy. Nori, filled with rage, glared at him with undisguised fury. How dare he speak about her master that way? Her body trembled, but not from fear, from anger. With a furious cry, she commanded him to shut up. Light energy surged around her, illuminating the infirmary as she prepared herself for a fight of her own. She could no longer listen to his nonsense. Jensen looked at Nori with visible annoyance, clearly unimpressed by her sudden outburst. Chinan, however, observed her carefully, his analytical mind immediately picking up on something unusual. Her loyalty toward this Korean S-class awakened was evident, but it wasn't just admiration, her devotion went beyond that of a mere maid. There was something off about her aura, something powerful yet unfamiliar. While she wasn't classified as a class, she had clearly trained under Tying. The energy radiating from her suggested she wasn't someone to be taken lightly, which meant they needed to tread carefully around her. Jensen, naturally oblivious to caution, mocked her outright, his voice laced with sarcasm and ridicule. Did she seriously want to fight him? He sneered, questioning whether she had released her aura just to play soccer, dismissing her presence as nothing more than an overreaction. Chunsin, who had been watching silently, almost laughed at Jensen's recklessness. The fool didn't even realize that his taunting might actually provide them with useful information. But it was already too late. Nori, without hesitation, confirmed his challenge. She wanted to fight. If Jensen wanted a battle, then she would dominate it. She needed to establish herself as the one in control. As she prepared to strike, memories flooded her mind. She could still remember the moment when she had asked Tying a simple question as his maid. Shouldn't she strive to be as tough and strong as him? Tying had barely reacted, answering with an almost bored expression. Strength, he had told her, was always cool. If she wanted to be respected, she must never let anyone look down on her. Those words had stayed with her. She had listened carefully as he continued, reminding her that bravery was essential, but underestimating an opponent was a fool's mistake. She was never to retreat. If someone dared to strike first, she was to strike back even harder. Her eyes snapped open, her entire body charged with energy. The time had come to prove herself. As she activated her abilities, she spoke with conviction, promising that Jensen would regret ever insulting her master. Jensen, who had expected her to back down, suddenly found himself feeling uneasy. Was she really serious about this fight? He had been mocking her, expecting her to shrink away, yet here she was, fully committed. A nervous flicker crossed his face as he glanced toward his comrade, searching for some guidance. But Chinan merely shrugged. This was Jensen's mess to clean up now. Realizing there was no way out, Jensen turned back to her and decided to act tough, ordering Chinan to stay quiet and let him handle things. However, before he could say anything else, Nori was already attacking. With fury in her eyes, she rushed forward, raising her weapon high, striking down with all her strength. Jensen reacted just in time, using his abilities to shield himself and his comrade. He gritted his teeth as he deflected the blow, staggering back slightly from the impact. He grunted in irritation and scoffed. Why was she so angry? Was she really ready to rip out an honored guest's throat over some insults? He shook his head, half laughing, and admitted that maybe they had taken things too far. With a mocking smirk, he suggested that it would be better for them to stop here, but Nori wasn't buying it. With a cold glare, she demanded to know why they were suddenly backing down. They had started this conflict, they had insulted her master, and yet now they wanted to walk away without an apology? Her voice grew sharper, her tone unyielding. She had no intention of killing anyone, but she wasn't going to let this go unpunished. Mi, standing at a distance, suddenly jumped into a battle stance, shouting that these scum deserved to be taught a lesson. Her voice was filled with determination, and the aura around her flared up with deadly intent. Jensen's smirk widened. So that was how it was going to be? Fine. If she was so determined, then they would finish this fight. Chinan, realizing that things were spiraling out of control, warned Jensen to stop provoking her further. But Jensen, grinning maliciously, activated his skill, launching deadly ice shards toward Nori. The frozen projectiles ripped through the air as they sped toward their target. Yet Nori didn't flinch. Instead of retreating, she charged forward straight into the attack, her determination unwavering. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the building, Tying carried Anderson over his shoulder, making his way toward the exit. But the distant sound of battle caught his attention. Without much thought, he dropped Anderson to the ground, muttering that there was no need for concern he hadn't killed him, though Anderson would need serious medical attention. The man with glasses, observing the state of the fallen warrior, nodded and stated that he understood. Serena, who had been watching everything in tense silence, remained fixated on the scene before her. Holman, forcing a nervous smile, couldn't help but feel immensely grateful that Tying had at least spared Anderson's life. If Anderson had actually died, the consequences would have been catastrophic. The Director of National Intelligence, staring at Anderson's defeated form, was utterly shocked. This was supposed to be the world's strongest awakened, and yet he had lost. This wasn't just an ordinary battle, this changed everything. For the first time, he realized the truth: their nation, South Korea, now had the strongest awakened in the world. With Taing's power, their country was no longer weak. They could stand against the United States, China, and any other nation that had ever tried to manipulate them. Taing, sensing the director's thoughts, suddenly spoke, his voice low and menacing. He told him outright that he knew exactly what he was thinking. Homan's breath caught in his throat, his nerves spiking. Taing continued, stating that the only reason he had fought Anderson was out of curiosity, not for politics, not for power games. He didn't care about the global balance of power. He had no interest in their schemes. But then, his expression hardened. With an icy glare, he warned them that they could do whatever they wanted, but they should never involve him in their affairs. His voice darkened, emphasizing that he would not tolerate being used. With that, he turned away, announcing that he was leaving and had no intention of being disturbed further. However, as he walked further into the building, he felt another surge of energy. The sounds of battle grew louder, and then he saw an ice spell in action. His eyes narrowed as he spotted Nuri breathing heavily, her body covered in injuries. Jensen, standing across from her, laughed as he activated his next attack, his voice filled with mocking amusement. He complimented her for holding out for so long, but this fight was over. Chinan, observing from the sidelines, was convinced that Jensen would win, but he couldn't shake the feeling of disbelief. How had this fight dragged on for so long? How was Nuri still standing? Jensen's world flipped upside down the moment Taing appeared. 1 second, he was relishing the sight of Nuri struggling against his ice, his moment of dominance, of proving that she and her so-called master were beneath him. The next, his vision was blocked entirely by a monstrous force clutching his face. Dark energy surged around them, twisting the air into something thick and suffocating, like the breath of death itself. Taing had arrived, and he was furious. The aura that surrounded him was unlike anything Jensen had ever encountered. Pure, suffocating, killing intent seeped into every corner of the room, making it nearly impossible to move. How? How had he arrived so suddenly? Hadn't he lost to Anderson? That was impossible. Anderson was the strongest awakened S-class. There was no way he could have lost. And yet, here Taing was, standing in front of him, unscathed, staring at him with eyes that burned with a desire to kill. Jensen, feeling his instincts scream at him to fight back, activated his ability in a desperate attempt to break free. Explosions of ice surged from his hands, crackling violently as they tried to freeze the enemy in place. But nothing happened. Taing did not react. He did not flinch. He didn't even acknowledge the attack as the shards of ice disintegrated before reaching him, as if the very air around him refused to allow their existence. Jensen gasped, realizing just how dire his situation was. His entire body screamed in pain as Taing tightened his grip, effortlessly lifting him off the ground. The sound of cracking bone echoed in his ears, making his panic grow tenfold. Then, with terrifying force, Taing slammed him into the ground, the impact so powerful that the entire floor shattered beneath them. A deafening boom reverberated through the building as dust and debris exploded outward, causing even Chinan to step back in shock. This was not a fight anymore. This was execution. Taehyung, his face devoid of any humanity, gazed down at Jensen as if he were nothing more than an insect. His expression didn't just hold anger, it was murderous rage, an animalistic fury, cold and merciless. The entire room felt like it was being swallowed by the abyss. Jensen, dazed and barely able to breathe, struggled to process how fast everything had changed. One moment, he was victorious. The next, he was at death's door. Taing's voice, low and deadly, rumbled through the destruction, a sound that sent an instinctual chill down everyone's spine. How dare he touch what belonged to him? How dare he lay a hand on what was his? His words weren't shouted, nor were they exaggerated with anger. They were simple, calm, and final, like the judgment of an executioner. Jensen, despite his pride, felt fear crawl up his throat. This was no longer a battle of strength. This was pure dominance. His mind reeled. Was this truly the same man who had fought Anderson? It shouldn't have been possible for him to be here, let alone standing so unscathed. Yet there was no mistaking the reality before him. Taing's killing intent thickened, making it difficult to even breathe. His presence alone was crushing, and it was becoming abundantly clear that he had been holding back this entire time. Chinan, who had been standing at a distance, felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple. If Anderson, the man they had all placed their faith in as the strongest in the world, had truly lost to this person, then everything they believed about power was a lie. Taing turned slightly, his gaze sweeping across the room like the Reaper himself. They had dared to lay hands on what belonged to him, and for that they would all pay. Just as he was about to unleash another devastating attack, Nori, her body trembling but her resolve unshaken, blocked his path. She stood before him, her injuries severe but her eyes determined. Despite the pain racking her body, she raised a weak but firm hand, insisting that she was already fine and that there was no need for him to kill anyone. Her expression was not one of fear but sadness, as if she knew what kind of darkness would be unleashed if he continued. Tying, his fury still burning, looked at her, his gaze softening slightly. She had tried. Despite her current state, she had fought with everything she had to defend his name. He walked toward her and, without a word, caught her just as she nearly collapsed. Nori, tears welling in her eyes, whispered that she had failed. She hadn't been strong enough. Tying, still supporting her with one arm, spoke with rare gentleness. She had failed, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had tried. That was enough. He raised his other hand, a faint energy radiating from his fingertips as he healed her wounds. Nori stared at him in surprise, feeling the pain fade as warmth spread through her body. She had witnessed his power many times, but never had she experienced it this closely. Tying, his expression unreadable, wrapped one arm around her before turning his cold gaze back to Chinan. Suddenly, a static-filled radio transmission crackled through the silence. Tying repeated the words aloud, making sure everyone in the room heard them. The message was simple, direct, and world-shattering. The United States' strongest S-class awakened has been defeated. The words hung in the air, sending shockwaves through everyone present. Chinan, frozen in place, could barely comprehend what he was hearing. The strongest awakened, defeated? The United States had lost its position as the most powerful awakened force? Tying, smirking as he lifted Nori into his arms, gave one final warning. They should leave this country before he changed his mind. Chinan watched silently, his mind racing. From this day forward, the title of the strongest country would no longer belong to the United States. No, it had been taken by the devil himself. Sometime later, at the Ares Guild headquarters, the weight of the battle still lingered in the air. A television broadcast echoed through the Grand Hall, announcing that Team Wolf had concluded their short visit to Korea and were heading back to the U.S. However, the reasons for their sudden departure were still unknown. Both the United States and South Korea refused to give any public statement regarding what had transpired. However, an anonymous source leaked a report that confirmed one thing: they had met with South Korea's S-class awakened. Sitting on a luxurious couch, Kim Un-suk, the head of the Ares Guild, clenched his jaw in frustration. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, cursing under his breath. Something impossible had happened. If Tying had truly defeated Anderson, then their entire power structure was at risk. Grinding his teeth, he muttered that with someone like Tying in control, they would never achieve anything. More than that, the Korean National Intelligence Agency had gotten to him first. On the opposite side of the room, Young-suk exhaled tiredly, staring at the ceiling. He wasn't as outwardly furious as Ki-moon, but the implications of what had happened weighed on him. Smiling faintly, he admitted that they couldn't claim something they didn't even understand. If they wanted to control this new power, they had to meet him first. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Serena shifted uncomfortably, her gaze flickering between the television screen and Tying. She was nervous. The broadcast continued playing some mindless entertainment program, but the true tension in the room was between them. Tying, completely unfazed, opened a can of soda with a bored expression. He didn't care. Nori let out a nervous laugh, but Serena's irritation was obvious. She sighed heavily, explaining that they needed to move. Tying glanced at her, unamused. He had just gotten there. Why exactly should he move again? Serena scratched the back of her head, laughing awkwardly. She admitted after a moment that there was a very good reason. The sudden presence of journalists swarming the area had caused an uproar. Their voices blended into a chaotic murmur as they crowded around, cameras flashing, eager to report on the S-class awakened who had shaken the world. Serena, her expression tense, immediately explained the situation to Tying. His current place of residence had been leaked to the public. There was no telling how many people knew, but one thing was certain: if he stayed here, his peace would be permanently disrupted. Tae-hyung stared at her seriously, unconcerned with the situation itself, but clearly expecting a solution. Serena, realizing that she needed to convince him quickly, hurriedly bowed her head, almost in desperation. She knew how much he hated unnecessary trouble, so they had already arranged a perfect alternative. They were offering him a place on an island, completely isolated from the rest of the world. There, no one would be able to bother him, and he would be able to live in absolute peace. She nervously added that they had built a fully equipped house there, something specifically designed for his comfort. If he just visited it once, she was certain he would like it. Finally, she pleaded with him politely, asking him to at least consider her request this one time. Tying remained thoughtful, his gaze shifting from Serena's anxious expression to his subordinate, Nuri. When his eyes met hers, he saw something different: excitement. Her usual calm demeanor had been replaced with pure joy, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. She looked like someone who had just been granted a lifelong dream. Noticing her enthusiasm, Tying finally asked, was she interested in this place? Nori nodded eagerly, smiling brightly. She admitted that she was, after all, she had always dreamed of living in a house on an island. She hesitated for a moment before glancing at him awkwardly, as if realizing she might have spoken too freely. Then, with a small, sheepish voice, she asked for his forgiveness for pushing her own desires into the decision. Serena, watching the exchange, held her breath. Had she been too forward? Had she been too casual? If Tying was offended by her suggestion, she might not live to see another day. She inwardly cursed herself, praying she hadn't stepped over the line. But just as she was about to spiral into panic, Tying finally spoke. He agreed to go. Serena's eyes widened in pure shock. For a moment she was frozen, unable to believe what she had just heard. Then, in a burst of overwhelming relief and joy, her eyes filled with tears. She could barely process the fact that he had actually agreed. He had never been the type to be persuaded by others, yet somehow, this time, it had worked. Without wasting another second, she declared that it was time for them to head there. Sometime later, they arrived at their new home. As soon as they stepped onto the island, Nuri's expression lit up with excitement. She took in the breathtaking surroundings, the pristine beaches, the luxurious residence, and the utter tranquility of the place. With a huge smile, she turned to him and asked, was this really where they were going to live now? It was beyond what she had expected. Serena, standing beside her, beamed with pride. She explained that they had purchased the entire island and built a resort-level home for him. Everything was designed for absolute privacy. No one would be able to disturb him here. The location was completely secluded, far from the rest of the world, ensuring that he would never have to deal with reporters, government officials, or enemies unless he chose to.
She screamed as Demon released her arms, pushing her off the skyship without any warning given. Falling rapidly, She's eyes widened in shock. The vast ocean below seemed ready to swallow her whole. Determined not to panic, she scanned the sky, noticing Demon diving towards her with incredible black wings. Catching her firmly midair, Demon stabilized their descent. His wings spread wide, breaking their dangerous freefall immediately. Meanwhile, inside the headquarters, Manager Harlow ordered faster preparations. "Stay alert! They'll arrive sooner than expected!" Manager Harlow raised his head, confirming their approach. His tense expression betrayed hidden concerns about Demon's return. Demon descended gracefully, black wings spreading wide. He landed perfectly, still holding She securely in his arms. The landing startled the nearby workers. They quickly organized crates, trying to hide their nervous glances towards Demon. She, relieved and grateful, whispered softly, "Thank you, Master." Demon nodded, his eyes already scanning the surroundings carefully. Manager Harlow announced confidently, "This is where we're going to live!" Everyone stared silently, unsure about this decision. Demon reassured She calmly, "Feel at ease. Everything has been properly prepared for our arrival today." She was surprised by the large welcoming crowd. Manager Harlow confirmed, "No, we've been waiting your arrival." Introducing himself formally, Harlow spoke, "My name is Go Chang-sok. I'll ensure your life remains comfortable here." Demon nodded with approval. His confident gaze scanned the gathered staff, ensuring loyalty and discipline among them. Harlow stepped forward politely. "Please come in, I'll show you around," he offered, leading them toward the entrance. She's eyes sparkled. "Look, Master, it's amazing, just like a hotel," she exclaimed, running ahead excitedly. Demon observed quietly. "It's decent inside, too, but something still feels incomplete," he thought to himself. With a serious tone, Demon commanded, "Let's see what you've got, butler." His expectations were clearly high. Manager Go Chang-seok responded confidently, "I'm sure you'll be pleased." His staff immediately prepared for the presentation. She gasped joyfully at the lavish feast prepared. Her excitement grew as delicious aromas filled the room. She gasped in delight, eyes wide. Colorful desserts appeared before her, while Demon calmly sipped his drink. Later, they joined a lively drum performance. She matched every beat enthusiastically. Demon watched her silently, amused. Excitement continued at the beach. She laughed freely, splashing into the water while the crowd cheered around them. Manager Go Chang-sok approached Demon, asking carefully, "Satisfied?" Demon leaned back, relaxing completely for the first time. Demon gazed at the clear sky. "I must admit it's not bad," he said, sipping his drink calmly. While she played joyfully, Demon received a mysterious message. His expression shifted slightly, sensing coming events. Lying relaxed, Demon smirked after reading the message. His eyes gleamed faintly. "It's going to be fun!" A helicopter approached rapidly, scattering leaves. Its arrival marked the beginning of something important and possibly dangerous. She and Demon stood side by side. Both watched curiously as the helicopter prepared for landing nearby. A mysterious figure stepped out confidently, smiling faintly. "It's been a while," he greeted, eyes locked on Demon. Demon greeted the mysterious man formally. "Thank you for taking up our offer," the man responded respectfully. The man smiled faintly, turning his head. "I'd like to introduce someone important," he said confidently. "This is Ms. Lee Yujin, the newest NAS member and an A-class awakener," he introduced proudly. Li Yujin walked forward gracefully, eyes locked onto Demon. Her confident steps drew everyone's quiet attention immediately. Observing Demon from a distance, Li Yujin asked curiously, "Is that him?" Her gaze remained unwavering. Demon sipped his drink casually, completely unfazed by the tense atmosphere forming around the unexpected introduction. Li Yujin narrowed her eyes, confused. "What is this?" she wondered, struggling to hide her growing disappointment. She mentally scoffed. "An S-class title? He's just a bum. And why is there a kid?" She, sensing the tension, bravely spoke up. "Hey, it's common courtesy to greet someone upon arrival." Li Yujin smirked coldly. "A kid like you has no place here. Get out of the way," she protested loudly, defending Demon. "He's amazing. You shouldn't speak about people without knowing anything first." Manager Go quickly tried calming Yujin. "Please understand, Miss..." Yujin's newly awakened, she's unfamiliar with proper decorum. Demon remained calm, sipping his drink. "Leave her be," he muttered indifferently. "I'm not going to waste time." Manager Go panicked. "I'm very sorry, Miss... Yujin recently became an A-class awakener. She's still quite arrogant." Demon chuckled softly, standing straight. "Funny," he said. "So, you're A-class? I guess you're kind of powerful then." Li Yujin smirked confidently. "But if you're powerful, you should recognize differences between you and opponents." Suddenly, an overwhelming, oppressive aura burst from Demon. Surrounding the area with terrifying, suffocating demonic energy, Demon's aura dominated everything. "An ant's bravado only provokes a king. It's about to get unpleasant," he warned. Yujin stumbled backward, trembling. What's this?" "I've never felt anything like this before," she whispered, completely overwhelmed. Meanwhile, she stood proudly. Manager Go nervously wiped his forehead, knowing Demon's power had silenced the arrogance. Demon withdrew his overwhelming presence. "I'll leave it at that," he said, completely unfazed by the confrontation. Li Yujin collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily. What was that? A test? I nearly froze." Manager Go quickly apologized, bowing deeply. "I'm very sorry. I believe she's definitely learned her lesson now." Demon smiled faintly. "It's fine. I'm intrigued," he admitted, finding amusement in how events had unfolded today. Yujin stood up slowly, recovering her composure. "Follow me," she instructed, her tone more respectful than before. Yujin pointed at she. "Subordinate, you too." She startled, wide-eyed. "Me?" she asked nervously, stepping forward. Yujin spoke firmly. "I want to see what you can do." She's expression quickly shifted to determination. She charged forward, fists clenched. "I don't like that. Don't treat me like a child," she shouted. With unwavering confidence, she declared, "I'm good enough to stand by my master's side." Her eyes sparkled fiercely. Yujin smiled faintly, turning away. "Take care." She responded respectfully. "You take care as well." Mutual respect was earned. She stepped forward confidently. "Let's begin," she declared, her determination shining clearly in her focused expression. Li Yujin narrowed her eyes. Sensing she's resolve, she silently acknowledged the small girl's unexpected courage. Yujin summoned her full power, dark energy swirling violently. Then, "I will fight with all my might!" Engulfed by power, Yujin activated her transformation. "Copy. Lord. Change!" Her aura flared, shaking the surrounding air. Watching calmly, Demon smiled slightly. "Yes, I'll give it my all," he whispered, intrigued by what followed. Yujin stood firm, dark aura swirling. "Me and my shape-shifting abilities," she declared, challenging she directly. She stood frozen, eyes wide. She sensed something terrifying emerging, completely unlike anything she'd faced before. A thick cloud of black smoke formed. From within, a powerful, monstrous figure slowly started taking shape. Manager Go observed nervously. "It's my first time seeing Yujin's shape-shifting skill. I wonder what it's like." Out of the swirling smoke, sharp claws and a terrifying silhouette emerged, radiating overwhelming hostile energy. Yujin fully transformed, her body now monstrous and deadly. Her crimson aura pulsed strongly with raw power. Demon calmly analyzed her transformation. "Your ability," he muttered, observing carefully, his mind already calculating possible outcomes. System windows appeared before him, listing her stats. Strength, 2,400. Speed, 2,500. Stamina, 3,000. Resistance, 3,500. HP, 2,400. Demon noted quickly, "The specs are nothing special, but shape-shifting? That's always an interesting skill to assess." He smirked slightly. "I've fought by Channels 3 before, but abilities differ drastically between each individual user." Demon narrowed his eyes. "This is beyond expectations," he admitted. "I never thought she'd reach another form." She gasped, heart pounding. The atmosphere grew tense, her instincts screaming danger as the transformation completed. She spotted the horns immediately. "Look at those red horns on her head," she whispered in shock. Recognition struck her instantly. Red Horn, the level 6 enemy from the Korean University Gate, she remembered clearly. Demon watched calmly. "An old nemesis has returned," he muttered, his expression unreadable, eyes locked on Yujin. Demon called out, "What will you do, subordinate?" She clenched her fist tightly, stepping forward without hesitation. Eugene smirked confidently. What, are you so scared that you can't even move? She mocked coldly. Eugene pressed further. Is it because the enemy before you once wiped out everyone in front? She clenched her fists tightly. Scared? Not even a bit, she answered, her voice unwavering with confidence. A faint smile appeared on Shi's face. I'm actually happy, she admitted, eyes shining with determination. Eugene clicked her tongue in annoyance. Tisk, she muttered, realizing Shi's courage wasn't something easily broken. She shouted boldly, Are you ready to be humbled? Her aura flared as power gathered rapidly. Eugene smirked. Ha! Her confidence remained, but her eyes tracked Shi's every movement with growing caution. With a sudden burst, she lunged forward. The ground cracked beneath her as raw speed took over. Focused and determined, she closed the distance, her form cutting through the air like a sharp blade. Outside, the entire facility trembled slightly from the shockwave. A fierce battle had clearly begun within its walls. The staff exchanged worried glances as distant tremors shook the room, signaling an intense battle nearby. One nervously asked, Hey, are you sure this is okay? The building might actually collapse from this. Manager Go smirked confidently. Don't worry, this building withstands even the strongest enemy attacks. You'll adjust soon. Inside the training hall, energy clashed fiercely. This will happen quite frequently, Manager Go remarked with unsettling calm. Eugene struggled to understand. How can so much strength and speed come from such a small body? Eugene gathered her full power. But I can stop it, she shouted, energy swirling uncontrollably around her. She launched forward. I have the power of an enemy, Eugene roared, striking fiercely with deadly precision. She calmly analyzed the incoming attack, stepping aside gracefully. Her focus never wavered despite the dangerous assault. With perfect timing, she launched herself forward. Her counterattack was fast, precise, and completely unexpected by Eugene. A single golden strand of hair drifted gently through the air, marking the climax of their clash. Eugene attacked fiercely, her claws slashing through the air. She narrowly dodged, feeling the overwhelming attack pressure. A sharp counter landed. Kia! Eugene grunted, clearly caught off guard by Shi's precise, powerful retaliation. Without hesitation, she followed up with a devastating aerial strike, closing the distance in a single motion. From above, Eugene prepared to counter. Her transformed horns glinted dangerously as she aimed for Shi directly. A brilliant clash of red and blue energies erupted, sending shockwaves across the battlefield, shaking the entire arena. Eugene gathered a powerful crimson sphere, her energy swirling violently, preparing for a final, decisive strike. She launched upward, swiftly avoiding the destructive attack, her movements sharp and perfectly timed under extreme pressure. Kyuk! She winced briefly but pushed through, her determination stronger than the pain surging through her body. Eugene growled, You better watch out. Unleashing a ferocious wave of power directly toward Shi's exposed position. With a determined shout, Ha! She countered head-on, their energies colliding fiercely, sending shockwaves throughout the entire area. A guard's face froze in shock as he watched the battle unfold with rising panic and disbelief. She was flung backward by a massive red blast, her figure spinning uncontrollably through the air. The explosion struck violently, red energy erupting across the battlefield, engulfing everything in a chaotic shockwave. Manager Go stared wide-eyed, struggling to comprehend the power he just witnessed from such a young girl. Demon remained calm, eyes narrowed. A faint smirk formed. He knew this was far from over. Eugene panted heavily. This is what you get for making a fool of me, she growled. Smoke filled the air. Eugene barely caught her breath, reminding herself she was still an A-class awakener. Suddenly she sensed movement. Hey! Eugene turned, confused, as a new presence rapidly closed the distance. She launched herself high, cutting through the sky effortlessly. Her next attack was already prepared mid-air. With precise speed, she descended directly toward Eugene, aiming a powerful kick toward her exposed head. She descended with force, sword in hand, aiming a finishing blow at the downed, transformed Eugene. With precise timing, she raised her massive blade high, prepared to strike with overwhelming power and accuracy. She's sharp gaze never left Eugene. Every movement was calculated, her stance unwavering and full of resolve. Eugene's eyes widened. She realized the tables had turned this time. She was the one cornered. Outside, Demon watched silently, arms crossed. His slight smirk revealed satisfaction at Shi's growth and unshaken confidence. Demon narrowed his eyes. Something clicked within him as he silently observed Shi's unwavering, determined stance. Suddenly, Demon shouted, That's it! His voice echoed across the battlefield, commanding attention from everyone present. The battle came to an abrupt halt. Eugene collapsed, unable to continue, her body completely exhausted. Demon crossed his arms calmly. Enough, he said, satisfied with the results displayed before him. She turned toward him, smiling brightly. Yes, master, she replied proudly, standing victorious over the defeated Eugene. Breathing heavily, Eugene thought, my strength, speed, and abilities were superior. Yet she still defeated me completely. She realized, I lost because she exploited my weaknesses. Her experience completely overwhelmed my raw power advantage. Determined, Eugene stood. With that man, I can definitely become stronger. she resolved, confidence returning despite defeat. Before she could speak, Demon interrupted coldly, "I refuse." She smirked proudly beside him, enjoying the moment. "What? I haven't even said anything yet!" Yujin stammered, completely flustered by Demon's immediate and firm rejection. Demon spoke firmly, "All you have going for you is that interesting ability, nothing more right now." He continued, "You're like a newborn taking first steps. I don't feel like mentoring you yet." Demon smirked slightly. "But you'd make a good opponent for me. If you want a chance, ask." Yujin looked surprised. What? She stammered, not expecting him to offer such an opportunity after her defeat. Demon turned toward Manager Go. "You should have sensed it by now. Still nothing? It's already getting late." Manager Go's phone vibrated urgently. His expression turned serious as he answered the unexpected emergency call. A panicked voice screamed through the line. "Mr. Kang, we're in trouble! Japan! Something's happened in Osaka! Flames consume the city." The voice continued, trembling. "Osaka is gone!" A dark shadow loomed ominously overhead. The aircraft cut through clear skies, carrying powerful individuals toward an impending battlefield far ahead. Inside, the atmosphere remained calm. The master quietly observed as his companion eagerly unwrapped packaged food. Chewing thoughtfully, she asked, "Isn't it faster for Master to fly alone?" He silently ignored her. Master replied, "When you leave home, do you run instead of taking a car?" She quietly understood. Despite approaching danger, the others seemed unnerved. One woman finally asked, "We're about to risk everything. Afraid?" The suited man stood confidently, addressing everyone. "Allow me to explain the current situation we're facing now." He showed them a tablet. An hour ago, a gate appeared in Osaka, Japan. Hostiles emerged immediately. Osaka's defenses collapsed quickly. Despite Japan's elite awakeners deploying, the unknown enemies completely overwhelmed their forces. All communication with deployed teams ceased. Authorities now presume that entire squad has been entirely annihilated. A woman smirked faintly. "Meanwhile," he continued, "the enemy emerged directly from this gate. Their strength is unprecedented." She trembled slightly, eyes wide. "It's a level 8, the strongest enemy ever faced," she whispered fearfully. Suddenly nauseous, she covered her mouth. The other girl calmly asked, "Motion sickness? You're pale and sweating." Flustered, she snapped back, "I don't have motion sickness!" Her voice cracked, betraying hidden nervousness. "Not scared?" she asked again. The calm girl smiled gently. "We're facing the strongest, but it's necessary." The blonde girl softened. "It's scary, but we'll save people. That makes everything worth it. Besides, don't worry." The dark-haired master adjusted his gloves calmly. "We have me," he muttered, eyes steady and unshaken. "A level 8. Is that finally the proper opponent?" His voice held boredom, craving a true challenge. He smirked slightly. "Hopefully this enemy won't disappoint like the previous weaklings," he thought without hesitation. The monstrous creature roared fiercely, its massive form rising. The city trembled under its terrifying presence. Their aircraft pierced through crimson skies, heading directly into the battlefield. The final confrontation was inevitable. The aircraft doors opened. A calm voice announced, arriving at the area of operations. "Prepare to descend." Without hesitation, the master stepped forward. "I'll go first," he declared, walking confidently into the open hatch. He leapt gracefully into the crimson sky, his cape trailing behind like a shadow above chaos. Winds howled around him. His expression remained calm, while monstrous roars echoed from the devastated city below. The blonde girl prepared to jump. "I'm going down too. Is your parachute ready?" she asked seriously. The older girl sighed. "You forgot the parachute belt again?" she teased. The younger girl blushed, embarrassed. "Well, I didn't," she mumbled nervously. The older girl smiled gently and began fastening the belt herself. "It's done. Relax a bit," she advised kindly. "You can't fight properly while being that tense." Yuen lowered her gaze. "Nori is so determined, but I'm still trembling, unable even to tie this." Nori reassured her softly. "I fought before." "You're strong, Yuen. You'll be fine when it matters." Nori gave a small, warm smile, trying to hide her own nervousness before speaking confidently again. Yuen smirked playfully. "But of course, I'm stronger." Nori chuckled. "Yes, senior, you're very strong." "All right," Nori declared. "We'll jump together on the count of 3. Stay calm and focused." Both approached the hatch opening. Nori inhaled deeply, preparing herself. 1, 2, she counted steadily. 3. Without hesitation, both girls leapt bravely into the raging sky, their descent marking the final battle. Both girls tumbled uncontrollably through the sky, screaming as the ground rushed closer at terrifying speed. The chaotic winds intensified. Despite the panic, they struggled to stabilize, desperately trying to regain balance mid-air. Meanwhile, their master glanced down with disinterest. He muttered, unimpressed by the unfolding chaos below. Spotting the monstrous enemy, he cracked a slight grin. "That's quite a big one. Finally interesting." Dark wings unfurled behind him, energy surged in his palm. "Well then, he whispered, descending toward battle. He tightened his grip, eyes burning with purpose. I'll give him a greeting worthy of him. Without hesitation, he leapt from the platform, tearing through the air as crimson energy flared beneath him. Koharu froze amid the bodies, disbelief spreading. The A-class awakener hadn't expected this level of power. She turned slowly. Hundreds of red orbs pulsed ominously unnatural, massive. Her breath caught as the beast stirred. Realizing the hopelessness, she trembled. Damn! Fuck this, I'm dead! Her instinct screamed, escape or perish instantly. The ground shook as the monster rose, its many red eyes pulsing with threatening, eerie precision. A shockwave surged outward, cracking the air. Its limbs moved rapidly, faster than human eyes could track. Koharu gasped in horror, instinctively stepping back. Her body stiffened. This threat surpassed anything she'd ever faced. Frozen, she watched the force charge ahead, destroying everything. She knew running wouldn't guarantee survival now. From above, a voice shouted, "We're going to land! Jet blast!" Reinforcements had finally entered the battle. Descending swiftly, the blonde warrior angled her flight, locking onto the impact zone near the creature. Her boots struck ground, momentum carried forward, blades drawn. She wasted no time assessing the threat. She landed directly in front of Koharu, stepping between her and the monster without hesitation or fear. A massive shockwave erupted from the warrior's strike, pushing debris back and shielding Koharu from further danger. Koharu winced but looked up. The warrior extended a hand calmly and asked, "Are you okay?" The blonde warrior stood tall. "Reinforcements from Korea," she announced, her presence calming the shaken survivors. The monster responded violently, letting out a distorted cry as its twisted body reared and struck downward. He, cloaked in black wings, dodged swiftly. His expression sharpened as he examined the unnatural threat ahead. He observed the beast's form and muttered, "Wow, this dude's a real anomaly. He's so ugly." With a cautious stare, he added, "I've never seen anything like it," preparing for the next move. A strange data screen appeared midair, listing the monster's stats, its class, deity, its danger, extreme. Among the details, a line stood out: lost basic logic due to a contract with entity. Demon read the final line aloud. Unique spec, deity. A grin formed as realization hit him. He chuckled slightly. "So you're an exiled god?" The air around him shifted with building tension. Dark wings unfurled fully. "Interesting," Demon said, eyes glowing red. "But I'm also an exiled god." Demon lunged forward, wings flaring outward. "Let's see," he muttered, launching himself toward the massive enemy. Sword raised, he stared ahead without hesitation. "How strong you are," he challenged, ready to strike hard. With wings spread wide, Demon dove sharply from above, aiming directly for the enemy's vulnerable core. The enemy's eyes followed his descent, pulsing with growing hostility as Demon picked up speed mid-air. Landing firmly, Demon twisted his body, shifting stance. His expression turned calm, completely focused on the target. Gathering momentum, he launched again, this time faster, fist clenched tight, aura surging with destructive power around him. The impact shattered the earth. Shockwaves exploded outward, engulfing buildings, while debris rained across the battlefield violently. The red-haired girl turned sharply at the warning. "Look out!" she cried, startled by incoming danger. A fiery explosion burst beside her. She stumbled, thrown off balance by the heat and force. She hit the ground, narrowly dodging a monster's claw. The blonde warrior quickly stepped in between. Eyes wide, the girl gasped, What the hell is that?" As the monster surged forward again, they both stood still, watching the beast roar, its body thrashing violently in a wave of power. The blonde girl smiled confidently. "That's my master," she said. The redhead blinked, confused by the statement. What?" she asked. A soft glow shimmered. Translation magic clarified the term just in time. The redhead stared at Demon's figure midair. "That's an awakener? Not an enemy?" she asked cautiously. "Yes, my master is so cool, isn't he?" the blonde said proudly, hands on her hips. She approached warmly. "Don't worry, master will take care of it." The redhead snapped. "Get your hands off!" The blonde girl stepped forward firmly. "No offense, but your attitude's really starting to annoy me." "I don't need your help," the redhead snapped, shoving past her. "Get out of my way!" "You're being disrespectful to the people who just saved your life," the blonde said, unfazed by anger. "If you constantly whine, don't complain about those helping. You're no better than Nuri, another A-class. How dare you?" The redhead hissed, clenching her fists, eyes burning from pride and boiling frustration combined. The warrior narrowed her eyes. Something didn't feel right. A quiet shift spread through the battlefield. Both girls turned sharply as synchronized footsteps echoed. Their earlier argument was forgotten in growing unease. From the distance, shadowy legs emerged, many, thick and heavy, crunching the ground with every monstrous step. The creature's eyes glowed again, brighter than before. Its movements were faster, more stable than previously. Dozens more legs pushed forward. Its massive body emerged, fully evolved. The spider had returned stronger than ever. The spider shrieked and charged. The girls readied themselves, blades drawn, standing together without hesitation. "You're right," the blonde said calmly. "I'd love to beat some sense into you, but—" She sighed, stepping forward. "We need to fight for our lives now." she finished, eyes narrowing sharply. The monster lunged again, its body glowing red. Its speed was even greater than before. High above, Demon watched silently, wings spread. The battle below had only just begun for them. The spider's eyes lit up. A massive web launched forward, aiming straight at Demon's mid-air form. Demon twisted mid-flight, narrowly avoiding entrapment. The web crackled behind him as tension surged through his muscles. He landed cleanly, cloak flowing. He muttered, unfazed, immediately analyzing the beast's movement and trajectory. Without delay, Demon shot forward again, his blade drawn, targeting the spider's exposed chest with precise force. The impact sent shockwaves across the battlefield. Dust erupted as debris scattered under the force of collision. Demon stood firm amid rubble. "You pesky bastard," he muttered, glaring at the monster's regenerating frame. He examined his swords calmly. "I'm afraid my swords can't deal any damage to you." Facing the towering beast, he admitted, "At this rate, I'll never be able to beat you." The creature shrieked again, its red eyes pulsing faster as it prepared another wave of assault. Demon smirked, eyes glowing red.
"Okay, I've decided," he said, a dangerous certainty in his voice.
Energy cracked around Demon's body as his transformation began. Bones shifted and dark power surged violently outward. "Be glad," he said, "for the first time in this world." His aura pulsed with dread. "I'm appearing in my true form." Muscles expanded, skin darkened. Demon's body fused multiple monstrous traits together. The spider hissed and reared back, instinctively recognizing the new form's power was far beyond normal. The blonde warrior braced herself. "That form, it's completely different," she muttered, readying for what came next. The spider froze, its many eyes locked onto Demon's transformed body, sensing something far beyond comprehension. Demon pointed directly at the monster. "If you really are a god," he challenged, voice steady. "I challenge you to fight this demon and survive," he declared, muscles tensing with unshakable resolve. Without hesitation, Demon surged forward. Dust exploded underfoot as he launched toward the beast like a missile, wings fully spread. "Power overflowing," he whispered. "Demon wings, ready to finish what the monster started." Demon slammed into the ground like a meteor, unleashing shockwaves that fractured the surface beneath him. In a flash, he took flight again, hurtling toward the monster with unmatched speed and force. His attack struck the beast directly. The impact was brutal, sending it crashing backward in a heap. The spider shrieked, hundreds of red eyes blinking wildly as pain rippled through its monstrous form. Demon soared higher, wings glowing. With fists raised, he prepared to deliver the next crushing strike. Demon dropped like a hammer from above, his landing cracking the battlefield with devastating vertical force. He stood firm, eyes locked. "Let's see if you can endure my punches," he declared confidently. Fists flew, striking the monster repeatedly. Blows landed in rapid succession, forcing the creature to stagger back, even under pressure. The spider's body held, its tough exoskeleton barely cracked from Demon's furious onslaught. Demon smirked slightly. "I'll give it to you. Your resistance is impeccable," he admitted, voice edged with respect. Demon hovered midair, gaze locked. "But are those eyes strong enough?" he asked, voice calm and sharp. Lightning burst from his form as he launched downward, striking the ground with explosive, blinding intensity. The spider wailed as the energy wave slammed into it, its body trembling from the impact. The creature recoiled violently, staggering backward. Its massive limbs scraped the earth, flailing in pain and confusion. Nearby, the girl screamed, "Ka!" The shockwave reached them, forcing the blonde to shield the others fast. Demon soared above, wings tight and angled, his eyes locked on the beast's center below. With a burst, he descended again, his full weight behind the dive, ready to end it now. The spider shrieked again. Demon's strike hit hard, knocking the monster flat with a crashing quake. Hovering above the dust, Demon spoke coldly. "Everyone has a weakness," his voice echoing across the battlefield. "You could endure my punches," he added, arms raised again, "but not what's coming next." Demon lifted his foot high. The ground cracked from pressure alone before he brought it down. The force surged across the battlefield. Dust spiraled as Demon's overwhelming aura spread with oppressive density. With quiet certainty, he muttered, "That's right," fully embracing the power awakening within his transformed body. The spider's many eyes blinked rapidly. It stepped back, sensing something far worse had just emerged. Dark purple energy exploded from the ground. The beast screeched, caught in the core of the blast. As Demon raised his arms, dark energy burst upward. Tentacles wrapped around him, something ancient had awakened. A strange aura clouded the battlefield. "That's—" someone shouted, recognizing the form that should not exist. Dark energy surged above the battlefield, forming crimson orbs. The demon lord silently began gathering massive power. A blood-red shockwave burst outward. His roar pierced the air as the ground cracked under sheer pressure. He lowered his arms slowly. The enemy's cries faded into the thick smoke swirling across the field. His gaze narrowed. From the ashes, something shifted. A presence remained, resisting his magic's overwhelming grip. A beast leapt through the smoke, claws extended. The demon lord turned instantly, raising his armored arm. The Demon Lord released concentrated poison mist, covering the ground as enemy forces began collapsing in waves. Those who inhaled the mist screamed in agony. The poison dismantled internal organs and dissolved magical resistance. This attack, known as all-annihilating poison, was developed to erase entire armies without physical engagement. Meanwhile, a young knight infiltrated from behind. She descended rapidly, avoiding contact with the corrupted atmosphere. Her goal wasn't victory through strength. She aimed to trigger an ancient mechanism hidden beneath the battlefield. Chiharu issued the command. The processing team, a specialized response unit, was now officially being deployed. As instructed, the blonde warrior struck fiercely. Her attack was meant to distract and weaken the enemy. A sudden warning echoed through her earpiece. The situation escalated. Orders now required immediate evacuation from the zone. Realizing the danger, she turned to retreat. Her comrade shouted urgently, and they both began withdrawing quickly. From underground, several monstrous beings began rising. Poison and energy pulsed violently from beneath the fractured terrain. A corrupted creature emerged, its body pulsing with poison. The atmosphere thickened, making breathing nearly impossible. The Red Warrior recoiled from the spreading fog, realizing too late that lethal poison had already been released. She blamed her ally for not warning her. The blonde admitted she only recently learned about it. Far behind them, Chiharu panicked. The ground trembled violently as energy surged from beneath the damaged streets. Before she could react, the monster lashed out. Chiharu and the blonde were both struck with force. As poison engulfed the area, the Red Warrior shouted for survivors to flee or face instant death. The Demon Lord confirmed the poison's strength. Even his reinforced skin began to corrode under its touch. He recognized the source immediately. This was no ordinary toxin. It was the divine poison used by gods. Despite its threat, he remained unmoved. His body tensed, preparing to counter what would come next. A massive explosion erupted nearby. The shockwave tore through buildings, signaling a new phase of destruction. The Demon Lord raised his arm, channeling fire magic. He challenged the poison with dragon's breath. Flames erupted in a violent spiral. The heat expanded rapidly, incinerating everything in its immediate path. The corrupted being recoiled. Its protective orbs flickered as the fire approached, disrupting the poison's balance. He mocked its fear. Something once revered as divine was now overwhelmed by raw elemental force. Igniting his full power, he lunged through the inferno, declaring the enemy's resistance meaningless and unworthy. The Demon Lord's flame surged forward, intensifying with each step as he charged toward the enemy's core. Suddenly, a blinding purple energy formed ahead, an enormous barrier generated by the corrupted being to defend. The fire clashed violently with the barrier. The surrounding air warped as pressure between forces rapidly increased. The poison core absorbed energy, pulsing erratically. The shield started cracking under the immense force being applied. With one final strike, the Demon Lord broke through, sending shockwaves as both forces collided in explosion. Suddenly, multiple purple spears shot through the air and pierced the Demon Lord's body from above. He gritted his teeth, pain evident. His movement slowed as his body struggled to contain the impact. The blonde warrior looked up in horror. Her voice cracked as she realized he was critically wounded. Despite the damage, the Demon Lord remained upright. Energy pulsed from his wounds, threatening structural collapse. Dark energy spread across his chest. The spears dug deeper as cracks formed throughout his demonic armor. Poison surged through his body. The Demon Lord recognized it instantly. It was divine poison meant to kill. The blonde warrior confirmed it. Only a rare few across dimensions could survive such god-level toxic power. Despite its potency, the Demon Lord stood firm. His resistance to magical affliction exceeded ordinary limits entirely. Grinning, he declared immunity. His body absorbed the poison's force, rendering the opponent's strongest tactic ineffective. Unleashing retaliation, he launched green-charged projectiles. Each blast cut through air, targeting the creature's weakened defenses directly. The Demon Lord activated his core. His altered blood neutralized poison before it could spread internally. The corrupted entity prepared a counterattack. Its core pulsated as energy gathered into a dense cluster. He dashed forward at full speed, determined to end the fight before it escalated further. His wings flared wide. He spiraled through the air with explosive force, closing the distance instantly. He slammed down at full strength. The impact crushed the creature's outer shell, cracking its energy barrier. The blonde watched from behind as the Demon Lord prepared his final strike, unwavering and fully healed. He stepped forward calmly. With a firm tone, he declared the battle would now come to end. His energy surged. Crimson auras spiraled around him as his power reached peak destructive concentration for release. He unleashed everything at once. The impact landed precisely, erupting into a series of consecutive core detonations. Chiharu observed from afar. Her eyes widened as the entire battlefield trembled under the finishing blow's force. The monster's core began to collapse. The last wave of explosions erupted violently in every direction. Shattered fragments burst from the crater. Smoke and shockwaves spread, signaling the complete disintegration of its body. The Demon Lord stood in silence, His breathing slowed as the poisonous winds finally began to fade. He lowered his arms and turned away. His presence alone was enough to end the conflict. The crater continued to burn. Remnants of the divine poison hissed as they dissolved into scorched earth. From the fractured earth, a final core emerged, massive, glowing red, signaling one last desperate countermeasure. The demon lord stepped forward calmly. The core's energy flared, but he showed no hesitation or fear. He raised his hand. Power condensed into his palm as the core began to violently resonate. With a final statement, he launched downward. His attack struck directly at the nucleus, aiming for annihilation. The blast exploded outward. The remaining core structures shattered under pressure, ending the corrupted entity's existence completely. From the monster's remains, a large pink gem was extracted, still radiating faint traces of contained energy. The demon lord examined the crystal carefully. He sensed something abnormal that didn't match its external appearance. He narrowed his eyes. The gem's aura felt unnatural, layered with concealed power beyond typical resonance levels. He explained, magic gems were byproducts impurities formed through compression of energy in powerful beings after defeat. Such gems often formed from low-grade creatures. But something felt different. This crystal carried traits far too refined. The demon lord held the gem aloft. Its glow revealed something more than mere residual energy. He theorized the gem's form changed after exposure to divine power, possibly through contact with a god. He stared at it in silence. Whatever its nature, the situation had clearly become more dangerous. The blonde warrior noticed agents approaching. Confused, she questioned their movement and intent toward the battlefield. Chiharu responded coldly. If word spread that a demon lord had aided humans, consequences would follow. Chiharu's expression hardened. She issued the command without hesitation, prioritizing secrecy over loyalty or personal sentiment. The blonde warrior froze. Betrayed, she realized the higher-ups had decided the demon lord couldn't be allowed alive. Chiharu explained coldly that revealing demon aid would weaken Japan's global authority and political influence immediately. Without emotion, she repeated her decision. The blonde warrior sensed hesitation but knew the order was real. The demon lord scoffed. He recalled how desperately they pleaded for survival just moments earlier in battle. His voice echoed with disdain. He challenged their betrayal, pointing out their hypocrisy after being saved completely. Surrounded, the situation shifted. Weapons were drawn. Everyone now viewed him as a liability to a race. Chiharu mocked their stance. She implied Japan's interests outweighed any foreign moral standards or battlefield alliances. The blonde warrior objected firmly. Their mission had always been to protect, not to destroy their allies. Chiharu dismissed her plea. She insisted that preserving national reputation justified turning against those who had helped. Without waiting for approval, she gave the order. Her agents charged forward to eliminate the demon lord. Reacting instantly, the demon lord dashed forward. He positioned himself between the attackers and the blonde warrior. Chiharu remained confident. She believed her team could eliminate the demon lord without needing additional support. The blonde girl gasped. She realized the situation was spiraling far beyond what she could control alone. Suddenly, the demon lord descended like a missile, crashing into the ground between both opposing forces. His impact created a crater. Shockwaves knocked back nearby attackers before they could even draw their weapons. The agents panicked. One shouted in disbelief at the overwhelming force he displayed with a single strike. A sudden force knocked weapons from the agents' hands. Their surprise left them completely exposed and disoriented. Chiharu's expression twisted in shock. Something unexpected had just shifted control of the entire situation in seconds. A tall man with long black hair stepped forward. His calm presence silenced the battlefield instantly. He glanced at Chiharu and the others. He addressed them with quiet authority and no visible hesitation. Knowing time was limited, he declared his intent to resolve the conflict swiftly with no further debate. Chiharu tried to maintain control, suggesting they could have kept the illusion of cooperation slightly longer. The demon lord stood beside the new ally. The situation had clearly shifted against the government agents. He explained bluntly they saved lives, but pride now drove those same people to eliminate them out of shame. With rising fury, the black-haired man accused them of betrayal. His protectiveness toward his side was clear. His voice boomed as pressure surged. All agents instinctively recoiled, weapons trembling under the weight of his command. The agents froze in place. An overwhelming pressure fell upon them. Unlike anything they had encountered before, though he spoke calmly, his words carried authority. Several agents found themselves paralyzed by the sheer force. Dark energy intensified. One agent trembled, imagining a massive unseen hand squeezing the life from his lungs. Even seasoned fighters grew hesitant. One urged Chiharu to reconsider. This target surpassed their assigned operational clearance. Still, Chiharu refused retreat. She believed backup forces could turn the tide, regardless of the enemy's class. The black-haired man calmly noted that even Japan's elite awakeners wouldn't arrive fast enough to intervene. Chiharu panicked. Realizing their time was short, she ordered everyone to keep attacking to stall him. He mocked their desperation. If they truly sought battle, he was more than prepared to respond completely. With dark power surging, He warned them those unwilling to surrender would be erased from existence without hesitation. The blonde girl looked on nervously. She called out to him, sensing he was about to escalate. The blonde girl stepped forward. Despite her fear, she knew she had to intervene without hesitation. She addressed Chiharu directly, even in betrayal. Her belief in protecting others hadn't been shaken or broken. With unwavering eyes, she offered terms. She challenged anyone, Chiharu or others, to a fair one-on-one fight. If victorious, she demanded freedom for their side and pledged to formally report Chiharu's actions afterward. If she lost, she promised silence. No retribution. She would settle everything herself without her master's help. The demon lord hesitated, concerned that allowing the fight might escalate and cause unnecessary injury to others. He questioned whether such people deserved protection at all, knowing they were willing to betray their saviors. The blonde gently called out. Her presence reminded him of the principles she stood for without hesitation. Amused by her conviction, he acknowledged her courage and agreed to let her fight without interference. He vowed neutrality. As Demon King, he promised not to intervene regardless of who won the duel. Chiharu panicked as the enemy approached. Raiden calmly analyzed the situation, seeing a fleeting strategic chance. He explained the diversion plan to Chiharu. Confidently stepping forward, Raiden instructed her to escape safely alone. Drawing his sword with determination, Raiden prepared for battle. His pride refused to lose against the Korean Awakener. The opponent arrived swiftly, golden-haired and armored. Her grip tightened on her blade, eyes locked on Raiden's stance. Above them, a third force silently observed. Their masked expression hinted at deeper motives behind this orchestrated encounter. Raiden stood firm as the blonde warrior approached, sword raised. The duel was moments from beginning. Chiharu watched anxiously from the distance, unable to interfere. The pressure from the girl's aura was overwhelming. A man with commanding presence emerged from the shadows, observing quietly. He demanded results from his subordinates' training. The blonde girl lunged forward with explosive force, her sword slicing the air as dust scattered upward. Her body blurred with speed. Raiden narrowed his eyes, preparing for impact as the ground trembled beneath them. Their swords clashed violently, sparks flying with each strike. Neither fighter gave ground during the opening exchange. The girl pressed forward, launching relentless attacks. Raiden barely deflected as debris scattered across the broken street. Her eyes locked onto him, analyzing his footwork. She adjusted her rhythm, aiming for his weak side. Raiden noticed her intent too late. His stance faltered slightly, and a sharp flash crossed his vision. Blood burst from his mouth as the blade pierced his shoulder. His body dropped, overwhelmed by pain. The masked overseer silently judged the outcome, unmoved. Her gaze confirmed the duel's result without emotion. Nuri stood tall beside Raiden's fallen form. Her name was declared victory officially belonged to her. Chiharu trembled in disbelief. Despite her doubts, Nuri had overpowered Raiden with a single, decisive blow. The commander finally spoke, addressing Nuri. He acknowledged her strength and declared their past debts now settled. With a rare smile, he praised her progress. Honoring his word, he prepared to fulfill his promise. Chiharu trembled with rage. Her pride shattered, she clenched her fists, unwilling to accept the outcome. She screamed accusations, branding the Korean Awakeners as dishonorable, her voice echoing through the destroyed urban ruins. Consumed by fury, she rallied her subordinates. She vowed the Koreans would not leave alive today. With a wave of her hand, she gave the command. The crowd rushed forward to attack. The red demoness flinched as a scream pierced the air. Chaos had begun, beyond her control now. The commander placed his hand gently on Nuri's head, signaling her role in battle was finished. She looked up at him with concern. Despite winning, something far greater was now being unleashed. His voice was calm, but crimson energy erupted. He admitted he rarely draws his sword for insects. Dark power spiraled outward, devouring the air. Screams erupted as the shockwave shredded through the charging enemies. The attackers froze, eyes wide with horror. They hadn't expected such overwhelming force to be used instantly. Chiharu stared in disbelief. The overwhelming aura surged toward her. Her instincts screamed too late for escape. The blast engulfed everything. Screams and shadows vanished instantly as the red wave obliterated her entire force. The explosion spread across the battlefield, leveling buildings. Smoke and flame consumed everything in its expanding radius. From within the smoke, the commander raised his arm. Concentrating energy into a red orb of power, he released it silently. The orb pulsed, drawing blood and shadows into a vortex around his body. Nori stood behind him, shielding her eyes. The attack ended as quickly as it had begun. He exhaled and scanned the area. With calm certainty, he declared the situation neutralized, all threats gone. With the threat eliminated, the commander turned away. He signaled Nori to follow and leave immediately. She hesitated, calling to him. Her expression showed admiration mixed with confusion, unsure what to feel next. The demoness watched him walk. Her thoughts spiraled. How could one man possess power that vast alone? She remained silent, awed. That man single-handedly destroyed a city-scale threat without support or visible effort. News spread quickly. The The Osaka Level 8 enemy incident ended with total destruction and massive structural collapse. News of the Osaka incident spread globally. Broadcast displayed images of the crater left by the explosion. Citizens across Tokyo watched solemnly. The media warned that recovery from such destruction would take decades. Japan's prime minister bowed in apology. He announced their formal request for aid from South Korea's awakeners. At the Korean Awakened Authority, an elder approached the team with urgent news and a sealed message. All eyes shifted toward him as he revealed the sender, Mr. Seotae, a Japanese official. A glowing ice spear floated inside the case. Magical symbols shimmered, radiating cold across the room. The girls leaned closer, eyes wide. The elder explained it was one of Japan's national magical treasures. Everyone admired the craftsmanship. The commander admitted it was impressive, though he didn't find it useful personally. He grabbed the spear calmly and placed it aside, joking that it could serve as a refrigerator. Turning serious, he requested Japan send something practical next time, like resources or gear his team could use. The commander sensed a presence approaching. He glanced toward the sea, instinctively aware something was heading in. The elder confirmed it, something unidentified was coming toward the island. The commander immediately moved to investigate calmly. They stood at the dock, watching a boat slice through the water toward the private island. A cheerful man on the boat admired the estate, clearly impressed by the size and location. He shouted excitedly, guessing the commander was an elite S-class awakener to own such a place. A group of men arrived nervously. Their leader apologized profusely, clearly intimidated by the overwhelming presence. The elder explained they represented the Japan Awakened Association. Their visit was previously requested but improperly handled. He clarified that Seotae had no appointment. The elder offered to remove them immediately in apology. The commander declined politely. Then, without hesitation, he stated the intruder didn't deserve another chance to leave. His tone turned cold. Challenging Kim Sung-chul without strength was an unforgivable act in his eyes. The commander issued a quiet order to prepare. His tone alone made Nori instantly alert and ready. Inside the house, lights dimmed. Every hallway fell silent as they prepared for an unwanted, hostile guest. The intruders entered cautiously. Their nerves cracked. This didn't feel like an ordinary S-class awakener's residence anymore. Dark energy surged from the commander. His smirk deepened. Their fear confirmed how unprepared they truly were. One stammered a response. The commander's voice sliced through the tension, demanding why they dared to visit him. With a calm smile, the commander welcomed them again and asked directly about their visit's purpose. The guests were seated across from him. Nuri and the others stood quietly, monitoring every movement. An attendant served drinks. The commander accepted iced chocolate without emotion, his demeanor calm but highly alert. One guest trembled while sipping. He sensed it too. This wasn't a normal S-class aura surrounding them. The commander's tone turned sharp. He demanded they speak quickly, making clear his patience was running out. The guild representative began sweating. The pressure from the commander's gaze made it hard to breathe. He dropped to his knees, lowering his head completely. Desperation drove him beyond formalities or pride. Begging aloud, he offered the commander a position in the Ares Guild, hoping to recruit him immediately. The commander responded without hesitation. His voice was calm, but final. He had no interest at all. Elsewhere, the Awakeners Association headquarters stood tall, unaware of the rejection just delivered to Japan's strongest guild. A man in a business suit scanned the report, confused why such a minor guild mattered. He dismissed it casually, uninterested in low-ranked awakeners or C-class organizations, barely making regional headlines. Another officer corrected him immediately. His voice turned serious, insisting that this guild was worth watching closely. He emphasized one reason above all: because the most dangerous man alive had now joined their ranks. Images confirmed it. The commander stood behind two subordinates. The officer's confidence was instantly replaced with fear. The officer leaned forward, urging his team to gather more intelligence. Something felt off about everything. His colleague summarized past findings. The Ares Guild leader, Kim Yoon-suk, had long targeted S-class status. They'd monitored his actions carefully. However, his unpredictable nature made tracking every movement nearly impossible so far. New intel arrived. Yoon-suk and his team were heading west. The news triggered instant concern across the table. They confirmed it. Kim Yoon-suk was heading toward the island, directly targeting the man living there. The officer grabbed his head in frustration. He couldn't believe they were heading straight for that monster. He ordered his team to uncover Kim Yoon-suk's true intentions and gather intel from every conversation. His subordinate confirmed the task. The officer sighed, admitting he had no idea how to counter him. And the idea that a C-class guild was engaging a threat like that made no sense. He feared the outcome. Whether successful or not, the Awakener Association would ultimately pay the price. He reached for his phone and dialed. The situation had become too risky to handle alone. The voice answered casually, an old contact, surprised by the sudden call after so much silence. Without delay, he explained the terms. He would reconsider the past offer if help was provided. On the other end, silence held for a moment. Then came agreement. If that's your offer. The agent collapsed from unseen force, nerves shattered, muscles limp. He had underestimated the one above all. On the throne, The demon lord sat unmoved, watching the body fall without a trace of concern. His eyes scanned the night sky briefly, calculating consequences, before returning to the defeated traitor below. The man's body twitched involuntarily. Years of loyalty meant nothing now. He'd failed the mission fatally. Deeming the man irrelevant, the demon lord mentally erased his name, just another piece discarded without hesitation. Beneath his boot, broken pebbles scattered a reminder of how easily power destroyed those beneath him. He mocked the man's arrogance, drinking calmly, aware the intruder dared enter without permission or preparation. Uninterested in further conflict, the demon lord dismissed him coldly, commanding him to leave without resistance, but the fallen man clenched his fists, desperation rising. He couldn't return without gaining something valuable. He remembered the aura the demon lord radiated, immense, overwhelming. That day, fear had etched itself deep. He rose in protest, voice shaking years of effort invalidated by a single judgment of worthlessness. Desperation filled his eyes as he defended their past missions, claiming their struggles weren't meaningless sacrifices. Beside him, a blonde agent stepped forward, suggesting alternative roles just to remain part of operations. Others supported her plea, willing to accept even low-tier responsibilities, just to avoid being discarded completely. Kneeling, the man begged with trembling arms, pride lost but still pleading for a chance to serve. Amused by the outburst, the demon lord chuckled softly, finding humor in their desperate determination to survive. He turned slowly, pretending not to hear, letting silence test their resolve before granting any attention. Finally, he acknowledged their plea, curious now, as their persistence hinted at something beyond mere survival instinct. With a shift in tone, he offered one condition: loyalty without question, absolute obedience without delay. The agent dropped to the ground trembling, but nodded, instantly willing to surrender everything for another chance. With a faint smirk, the demon lord tested their loyalty, demanding the destruction of an entire organization. His sudden command shocked them, their confidence shaking as the target was far beyond their capability. Still reeling, they could only react with disbelief, struggling to process the scale of his demand. A high-speed vessel launched across the ocean, signaling the start of an operation no one expected. Despite doubts, one agent declared boldly they had no better option, and failure awaited either path forward. Their ship raced across the sea, ordered to erase evidence and prepare for a detailed operation. One agent spoke with enthusiasm, hopeful for riches if they succeeded in the seemingly impossible mission. Meanwhile, in private, an aide questioned the master's decision, uncertain why such a reckless command was given. The master casually admitted its difficulty, acknowledging the mission's scale and impossibility without hesitation or regret. A strategist detailed their enemy, the Awakeners Association, backed by 3 elite guilds and countless powerful individuals. His smirk deepened as she questioned the logic, knowing his motives weren't based on fairness. He explained plainly, if they could do the impossible, they were worth some limited usefulness. Still, he refused to fully trust them. They weren't part of his true plan or goals. Their only role was to create momentum, a rallying reason to confront the Awakener Society head-on. His eyes sharpened. He hadn't forgotten. Everything was still connected to the vengeance he carefully planned. Surrounded by swirling energy, he reaffirmed his vow to destroy everything tied to his long-held grudge. He declared the agent's mission as fuel, using their struggle as justification for his coming retaliation. His resolve unsettled his followers. They sensed his revenge wasn't just personal, it was deeply calculated. Even the calmest among them admitted whoever his targets were, they wouldn't die easily or quietly. Elsewhere, under surveillance, Mr. Q was approached, his movements monitored as suspicion toward him steadily increased. The Valkyrie guild leader, Sion, confronted him, her tone calm but her presence filled the room. Mr. Q tried to deflect suspicion, feigning confusion as pressure mounted around his previously hidden actions. Sion shut down the act. Instantly, her team had already traced and documented everything he tried hiding. She accused him of betrayal, contacting powerful individuals outside the guilds without formal approval or oversight. His visit to the S-Class Awakener, Demon Lord, had exposed a risky attempt to shift alliances. Mr. Kim flinched as the tension built. His actions had drawn attention he hadn't expected this soon. Sion spoke softly but firmly, assuring him they wouldn't resort to violence without cause or necessity. She reminded him of Valkyrie Guild's role, servants of national stability, not underground enforcers or reckless aggressors. Still, she pressed harder, demanding to know what deal he struck with the S-Class Awakener. She voiced her concern aloud, the worst scenario being an alliance powerful enough to disrupt guild balance. Sion warned him if he disrupted the balance, every guild and agency would turn against him. Silence followed. Mr. Kim stared blankly, struggling to decide whether to lie, deflect, or reveal everything. He parted his lips slowly, considering the consequences of honesty, then chose to speak against his instinct. The atmosphere tensed around the room as other agents leaned in, curious about what he'd reveal. Elsewhere, a young girl's training was interrupted. She sensed an unnatural surge echoing from far away. While training, Yulin received news Demon Lord had moved without warning, triggering unexpected political and military consequences. Suspicious, she demanded answers over the phone, wondering how they dared exclude her from the chain. She noticed the silence, interpreting it as betrayal left out and abandoned during critical developments again. The contact on the line panicked, trying to calm her down, but she sensed deeper problems. Suddenly, another team member burst in breathless, announcing a direct call from the National Intelligence Service just arrived. Demon Lord checked the message carefully. The sender shocked him. It was from the Ares Guild leader. Outside, a group of agents arrived with urgency. Their sudden presence drew attention from nearby onlookers. One of the agents stepped forward, questioning a man directly, confirming his identity as Ares Guild's head. The group paused in confusion. None of them recognized the name or who they were facing. Elsewhere, Sion quietly observed, sipping her drink. She already suspected the situation was about to escalate. Sion's eyes widened sharply. Something was wrong. Her instincts screamed just moments before the impact occurred. A violent explosion erupted near the building, engulfing everything in fire and debris within seconds. Elsewhere, a man watched calmly, accusing a traitor of betrayal despite previously offering alliance and support. His expression turned mocking, claiming loyalty meant nothing, and survival always came at the expense of others. News spread quickly. Images of the explosion circulated online, identifying the attackers as members of Red Dragon. Demon Lord stared at the screen. Reading the report, his smirk widened as chaos unfolded perfectly. A private jet soared through the sky, carrying urgent passengers responding to the unrest unfolding below. Agents disembarked rapidly. The news reached them mid-air. Demon Lord's move had already triggered multiple violent incidents. Confused, a top officer demanded clarification. The words Demon Lord and strike changed his expression instantly. Reports confirmed Kim Yoon-sok had been attacked in broad daylight, causing shock throughout the guild network. Sion stepped through the ruins, confirming her presence prevented total disaster, but the conflict had officially begun. An agent stepped forward with concern. Information had surfaced that changed their understanding of the situation entirely. The shocking update revealed Demon Lord had already assumed full control over the once independent Ares Guild. The commander was stunned, struggling to understand when the takeover had happened right under their watch. Another officer confirmed it had been verified, just recently discovered only minutes earlier by trusted intelligence sources. They added that Demon Lord blamed the Awakened Association for targeting his subordinates, igniting his hostile response. The agents stammered in disbelief. Demon Lord's strategy had caught even their highest ranks completely off guard. Realization hit another member. This wasn't coincidence. It had all been calculated long before any violence began. She explained clearly. Demon Lord planned everything. The attack served only to justify his claim over the guild. Now, he was using that pretense to escalate matters and retaliate against those behind his pain. While en route, a companion asked if their next stop was the National Intelligence Service headquarters. Demon Lord gave his next directive, shifting his focus from Ares to the Valkyrie Guild headquarters. Sion acknowledged the decision with a nod, hiding her uncertainty as new tensions silently built around them. Beside her, the younger agent hesitated. Troubled by the sudden shift and its unpredictable consequences, she finally spoke up, reluctantly starting to voice concerns about the risk they were diving into. Before she could finish, Demon Lord interrupted confidently. He already understood her hesitation and what she feared most. She pleaded for restraint, hoping Demon Lord wouldn't pursue absolute destruction out of anger and grief alone. Demon Lord agreed, acknowledging not everyone needed to die. He valued strategy over blind revenge or wasted effort. He revealed his broader goal, to take control of the Awakened Association and use its structure. To him, power had value when preserved. Tools weren't discarded when they could still serve purpose. He aimed to assess the Valkyrie Guild's worth, deciding whether to spare them before initiating full conflict. Demon Lord reaffirmed his intent. He only spared groups or individuals who served a strategic purpose to him. Their car arrived at the towering Valkyrie Guild headquarters, casting long shadows across the pavement below. Inside, agents scrambled, preparing to respond. An unexpected visit from an S-Class Awakener stirred immediate alarm. Sion entered with authority, ordering her people to stay calm and maintain control of the situation. She knew if Demon Lord approached directly, it meant diplomacy had failed, or worse, he'd already chosen force. As they entered, Demon Lord remained calm. No matter the outcome, he would maintain control throughout. Sion prepared herself mentally. She would do anything to avoid conflict, even at significant personal sacrifice. Demon Lord's voice echoed across the hall as he addressed her directly, confirming her identity without hesitation. She stood tall, introducing herself confidently as Park Sion, Valkyrie Guild's leader. Data glowing in sync, Demon Lord assessed her silently. Her strength surprised him. For a C rank, her energy was far from average. Sion began her explanation calmly, clarifying that her guild had no role in harming Yoon-sok. She admitted confronting him only because he investigated the top guilds behind the Awakened Association's control. Their confrontation was internal politics. Nothing was meant to challenge Demon Lord's authority or interfere with his goals. But when she mentioned the Elsum Guild, Demon Lord's mood shifted. His expression grew colder with suspicion. He glared sharply, aura rising, accusing her of lying. He believed no one was ignorant of them. Sion insisted again her guild didn't collaborate with Kim Moon-sok or plan any move against Demon Lord. She explained his investigation was self-initiated and had nothing to do with their guild's directives. Demon Lord wasn't convinced. His voice was cold as he demanded a clearer, more detailed explanation immediately. Sion clarified Valkyrie Guild wasn't even present during the incident involving Ilsem and bore no direct blame. Another agent revealed the real culprit, Chairman Cheon Yulum, who accepted bribes to bury the entire scandal. Sion admitted her guild lacked power to confront Red Dragon directly and chose survival over resistance. She explained that exposing the Ilsem Guild would shatter public trust and fracture the association permanently. The younger agent added that without unity, defending South Korea from future enemies would become impossible. Seun defended her decision, saying they chose the lesser evil for national security, not to support Ilsem. But Demon Lord challenged her integrity, pointing out her silence ultimately made her complicit in everything that happened. Demon Lord's energy surged violently, his patience shattered. Her justifications were meaningless in the face of betrayal. He declared her silence had cost innocent lives, and someone must now bear that consequence directly. Seun braced herself, she knew arguing wouldn't work. He was preparing to eliminate everyone without hesitation. Her subordinates reacted instantly, launching a barrier in desperation to stop the incoming wave of destruction. But Demon Lord's attack broke through. The shockwave struck her directly, sending her crashing backward with a scream. A Valkyrie agent charged forward, enraged, his weapon raised high as he aimed straight for Demon Lord. Before he could strike, the blonde agent intercepted him mid-air, slamming him hard into the floor. Another guild member lunged in response, but she countered with a swift blow, knocking him unconscious instantly. As flames erupted across the room, a furious scream followed a desperate attempt to protect their leader. Demon Lord restrained an attacker with crimson chains, mocking her resistance and warning her not to move again. Demon Lord lifted Sion by the neck, his expression void of mercy as her body dangled helplessly. He acknowledged her intentions but made it clear this war wasn't political, it was deeply personal. To him, this was vengeance, punishment for pain inflicted on his family, not strategy or diplomacy. Sion gasped for breath, pleading for her life, willing to accept death to save her people. Barely able to speak, she begged him to spare the others, asking for mercy on their behalf. Then, Demon Lord paused in silence, his grip loosening slightly as Sion's pleas echoed in his thoughts. Nearby, the blonde warrior watched vigilantly, ready to act if Demon Lord's rage turned toward the others again. Demon Lord's eyes glowed red with fury, conflicted between his vengeance and the restraint her sacrifice might demand.